Hey everybody, we are here with Dan Day and Company, and our special guest is Steve Richards, the founder and author of Holographic Kinetics. And today on the state side of things, it's a chilly Saturday evening, February 16th. And Dan, what's it like over on your side of the world there?
It's a little overcast and chilly here today where I am in Brisbane, Australia. It is the 17th of Feb 2013, and thankfully for me, I'm inside where it's nice and warm. But yes, I am looking forward to what I'm sure will be an interesting discussion with Steve and yourself today.
Okay. And our guest today, we're welcoming Steve and hopping right into things. And although Steve has numerous videos and articles on the web and on Holographic Kinetics website, for those who are not familiar with Steve or his work, Steve, can you give us a very brief description of Holographic Kinetics and what its intended purpose is?
Well, holographic kinetics itself was originated from, I'm actually an Aboriginal descendant. As an Aboriginal descendant, 4 years old, my mother sat me down and wanted to know how I knew things were happening. I remember the past. Today I'm seeing where they give electric shock treatment to children for remembering things they claim that don't exist. As I was 8 years old and I grew up, I could make water go around my finger without touching it. By the time I was a teenager, I was doing mind magic. Not the fact I was doing it because I used to entertain at parties, hilarious things, but what am I doing, how am I doing it? And I want to know what I'm doing. And what it was that it's linked to the genetic line now, and to understand that, I had my great-grandmother taken away at the age of 8 by Aboriginal Protection Agency, found in horse shackles at 14, sold to a drover and died at 15, giving birth to my grandmother. My grandmother was actually brought up in a cattle station and brought up by the church. And what took place, she was very well educated by the church, but the maids, the servants, the butlers and the gardeners took her under the wing and taught her the old ways. Now, as I grew up as a child, she would tell me about the old ways. That would trigger off more memories in me and more events in me to get me to where I was. Now, over the years, I understand that Dreamtime healing is Aboriginal cultural understanding through the Dreamtime, how to communicate to the spirit of the animal, the trees, the rocks, everything's alive. Mm-hmm. And holographic kinetics is the science behind that knowledge and how it works.
Okay, awesome.
All right. So, Steve, are you able to talk a little bit about what you see that kind of sets HK apart from other healing modalities that people might be using or practicing out there today?
Most other healing modalities out there today are accessing the soul of the being, or the vehicle as I call it. Mm-hmm. And the soul is, and this is hard, some people have no idea between the spirit and the soul. So it might be, if I give you a little example to fit you into the slot here. I've got a model that comes in from Europe in front of thousands of people on the catwalk every day, no problems. But every morning she wakes up with anxiety, doesn't know why. So she comes to see me, we get her on the table. Her spirit indicates the cause effect is 16 years old. So go there now. What's happening? I remember. I had a friend come and stay, he slept on the lounge room floor and I felt something happen. All I remember is the soul. The soul remembers the experiences. Thank you. Spirit, surface now. Spirit, what took place? You drugged the body and you raped me. You drugged the body and you raped me. I couldn't wake the body. The spirit had the trauma because the body had been put to sleep through the drugs. There is a difference between the two. The spirit's the internal being, the essence of the being, that's moving through time in the vehicle. The soul is the external world put upon the internal world. Thus, in the cells of the being, the soul is programming of all the experiences into your cells and memories.
Okay, so it sounds like you're consulting the soul and then going to spirit, and it's giving you sort of an overlay here of what has occurred at this time to cause this trauma that the soul is carrying.
What we're doing is we're getting permission, because it's based on a mathematical formula in this universe. So we're actually getting permission from both the spirit and the person. We're overriding the soul because we're going straight to the spirit, who knows how, where, when, and why. It tells us what happened to the soul. Okay. It can change the soul. The soul can't change the spirit. Okay. But the spirit knows how, where, when, and why. No matter how far back in time something's taken place.
Awesome. Okay. I have a question, and because this is very intimate with you, because you've actually removed traumas and an entity from yourself. And from your personal point of view, could you describe briefly how your quality of life was prior to this event, and then how things began to unfold for you after you cleared yourself?
Well, an event took place where I actually challenged the gods, to be quite honest, and I broke all the agreements I've ever made through time. And that was the most interesting thing that's ever happened to me in my life. The moment I broke the agreements, it was as if they pulled the rug from under me, as though they'd been saying, look, we've been grooming you. And I already knew I had something big in there because, I had a business, and I had some guy one day came and gave me a cheek, and I remember I used to let this thing just take over. Next thing I know, I've flown over the counter into the guy and I've been outside him into him. And I realised, whoa, this wasn't me, this was this other thing. And I had to learn to harness this thing. I knew it was there, been there, I knew as a teenager it was there. But I let it go, left it at that. And when I broke this agreement, it's like all of a sudden what took place was I no longer belonged to any of them. So I was open slather. And I was being hit psychically by everything under the sun. This went on for a month. I found my business was receding backwards. I found recession had gone to 19.5, interest I was paying. Look, so many things happened at the one time. And to top it off, I had an apartment in Surfers Paradise. I had a $47,000 Flybridge cruiser on me jetty. I walked outside, my cruise was gone. So I walked in, walked out, I started laughing. And I looked up. And I said, won't swear on air, but, take the lot. Doesn't bother me. And I said, matter of fact, you can take your mate too, because it's time he came out. And I went in to battle this thing that was inside of me, and I was actually doubled up, dry gulching, battling this thing with sheer determinism to remove it. I felt it lift. And when it lifted, I've never felt so clear in my entire life. Then my comment was, now I'm going after the rest of you, and of course that's where I've been ever since. The difference is that once this thing was lifted, it gives you clarity. It's like all of a sudden part of you awakens to another dimension. I now call it, what I look at is, because of the mathematical formula of how it works, I believe you move from this matrix to another matrix outside. And I believe the game is to keep moving out these matrices will eventually break out of this matrix. But the matrix around us, the moment we move from that matrix to the next matrix, what does take place now, and this is interesting, because I found when people, we clear them up and they move them from what I call the fishbowl, and the fishbowl is the central point of the matrix where the fish are going round and round in circles. They think they're going ahead, they think they're getting somewhere, but they're just going round and round in circles, getting nowhere. But when you take them out, you take people out of the fishbowl to the matrix, it creates new awareness in them. But if they decide to go back to their drugs because their friends are doing it, and you've cleared them of drugs, and you've cleared the entities, well, what happens is, because they've moved to another matrix, there are bigger and more powerful forces on each matrix to battle you.
Oh,
and they're worse than they were the first time.
Mm-hmm. I can vouch for the sense of clarity and the weight being lifted from your shoulders. After having a session with Steve, I found exactly the same thing. I walked out of there feeling, 10 foot tall and bulletproof, and a sense of clarity of mind and awareness that I'd just never experienced before, at least couldn't remember experiencing. So, there's definitely something to that.
Almost as if other dimensions had opened within you, or you, in fact, become dimensions or facets within you that suddenly become known to you, that have been there the entire time but shrouded.
What I believe actually takes place is that when I'm talking to a person, I'm actually, all I do is get permission from you, and the rest of it, I'm not really interested. I'm not interested in all the rigmarole people come in and want to know, all the stuff they want to tell me about. All I want to know is what's affecting you, so your spirit can talk to me. The moment I access your spirit, I'm communicating to it. And on another level, it's all of a sudden it says, boy, for the first time in my life, someone's decided to recognise me and communicate to me. And it's like it becomes alive, it becomes awake. And that's what you're feeling. It's no longer stuck in the program of amnesia. It awakens itself from the amnesia it's been programmed into.
It's like it's kind of been lying dormant, sitting there waiting.
Yes.
For the person to communicate with it, to access it.
Well, most of my clients, I'm finding over the years when you start working with these people, they're giving their power outside themselves, to all these other beings outside themselves. Meanwhile, their spirit in them has been trying to show them, it's been trying to tell them, it's been trying to guide them, and they're thanking everybody else out there and everything else out in the sun, but they're not thanking their own spirit. Now, how would your spirit feel? Let's say you're a spirit and you're doing all the work, you're trying to get someone on track all the time, and they totally ignore you and they thank everybody else outside their reality. And all of a sudden, one day, somebody comes along and starts to communicate to it, recognise it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a bit what it's like. All of a sudden, finally, someone's listening to me. It awakens.
Personally, I think that's a key, for everyone out there is to kind of learn to be able to listen to those subtle influences and, the communication coming from their spirit and to act upon it. I think a lot of people out there they don't hear it, and they're letting all of these other things influence them.
I also have to stress one very important thing, and that is that my own culture, we have what's known as, Royal Commissions, the Brenham Home Report, the Deaths in Custody Report, the Rights of Indigenous Australia, the Rights of Mental Health Australia, Human Rights. We have all these millions and millions and millions of dollars was put into all these inquiries. And at every inquiry, the elders stated, we need to heal the spirit. And they go away and say, well, we're giving spirituality in the form of religion. What more do you want? No, it's got nothing to do with religion. We need to heal the spirit. Aboriginal culture communicates the spirit of the trees, the spirit of the rocks, the spirits in nature. They lived for 60,000 years without interference from white man till white man came. And look at the problems we've got today. Because they've forgotten law, because stolen generation took away all the knowledge. Today, I go to communities, they tell me how evil they used to be because they've been programmed. And, how evil they were since before Jesus came, they were evil. What a load of rubbish. They lived by nature, they knew law, and they didn't violate law. Because they knew if they violate law, it'd come back on them. Because this is
and that's the way that we need to get back to.
Certainly.
Yep. It's a program protecting itself.
Yeah, well, it's a program that's been put into place because the Aboriginal culture itself came from the spirit. Very powerful as the spirit when you understand it. So by taking away the children, they traumatise the spirit of the child, they traumatise the spirit of the parents, they traumatise the spirit of the community. Once they've traumatised the spirit, that gives these beings access to the soul. Look at war. In Boston, when they shot 2 members of every family, left the rest alive. Why? To traumatise the spirit. To give them access to the soul for the future. You go back to the Inquisition, and they're going to kill you anyway because you became a bit smart and started asking questions and started healing people. So they torture you before they kill you to get you to submit to get the soul for the future. You go back to the Aztecs, at the end of the last cycle, they virtually say disappeared overnight, but before they disappeared, they ripped the hearts out of 30,000 people a day sometimes to traumatise the spirit and trap the souls into the future.
So this is creating a generational effect that we're in the present, we're having to cope with trauma that was inflicted in the past, culturally, and so it has it's like self-breeding going down through the generations here.
Certainly. I mean, look, here's an example again. I've got an Aboriginal woman who can't associate with the children. So we go to work on it, and it goes back to the great-great-great-grandmother. So with holographic kinetics, I call the spirit of the great-great-grandmother through the hologram of time to come forward. Next minute, I have the spirit of the great-great-grandmother talking out of the body on the table. What's taken place? They've just come and taken my children. I can't afford to love any more of my children because I don't know when they're going to come and take the rest. So she shut down. That is now passed down through the generations and what they call epigenetics, but they can't access the generations like we can. When we unfold time and space on the dimension and we change the dimension of the past for the present, it instantly changes the future cycle of time. Then morphogenic resonance takes place and clears the generations down through time. That woman then went on to become Australian of the Year.
Wow.
Working with children.
In your case studies, and some of them were rather extreme sorts of influence where, a guy was, having fits of rage like he was a bear and then there was a...
Well, yeah, sure. Well, what you're doing there with him, the fact is it wasn't fits of rage. He was actually... He came in, both his arms had been broken at the elbows and stitched. He had 3 broken ribs. by an invisible force. I said, well, that's a new one. I said, what happened? And he says, look, 9 years ago I went to a party, I got drunk. I woke up the next morning, there's someone on my chest belting the living daylights out of me, accusing me of stealing. I had no idea what he was talking about. But from that day on, this thing would surface. It was huge. It picked me up, threw me across the room, threw me down flights of stairs, broke both my arms, broke through my ribs. Another time it jumped into my girlfriend, ripped hunks of hair out of my head and clawed me. This thing's huge, I want to get rid of it.
Right.
I said, well, I reckon you would. So when I put him on the table to access it, next minute he physically starts to shapeshift. His mouth extends out, he starts yawning, and he's belching. And it's something like 20 times my size belching away on the table. And I thought, what in the hell have I got here? Spirit, how far back in time does this take place? And instantly it says 1,500 years ago. Thank you. Go there. What happened? I'm a hunter. Thank you. What happened? Hunting down a bear. Now what happened is he killed the bear, and the bear turned and killed him. It wasn't dead. The two of them had died in great universal fear, which had been asleep for 1,500 years.
Wow.
9 years ago, we'd never been so petrified. That universe that had never been cleared had activated a sleeper. The universe has now override itself in present day, and the spirit of the bear is now he's feeling present day and wants out. So I had to bring the spirit of the bear up, send him back 1,500 years, change the past and present for the future, send the man back, change the past and present for the future, then release the spirit of the bear. When we finished, the guy goes, my God, it makes so much sense. I've had years of nightmares being attacked by a bear. But that's not all. Look at this. And he took his shirt off and turned around. His backside, his chest were covered in hairs 2 inches long. The thing was morphing into him. That now takes Darwin theory to a whole new level. Forget about Darwin's theory, because all that is that's just linked to a genetic line. It's not looking at what comes in with the spirit, because whatever comes in with the spirit, as well as what's on the genetic line, integrate, and the two of them will morph through as one.
So it affects your genetics when this occurs.
No. What I'm saying, the genetic line down time is your generations, but as a vehicle, whatever comes into the vehicle with you will morph into the vehicle.
Okay.
So you've got the generations in the morphing in the vehicle, and you've also got the spirit coming into the vehicle with whatever's attached to it. This is why at times you'll see entities in the features of people. And when you take them out, watch the features change, because they're no longer in their field.
It certainly gives us a whole new insight into shape-shifting and werewolves and things of that nature.
Oh, sure. And on a full moon, it's interesting, because on a full moon, this is the time where morphing can actually take place.
Right.
I mean, one of the best ones I ever had was I had a woman in from France. She came in with a husband from France. No one could help her. She's on my table, and the next minute she physically metamorphs. And I mean full-on metamorphosis here. 1 minute I got a 22-year-old on the table, next minute an 87-year-old Chinese grandmother curled up speaking to me in Chinese. I said, Spirit, send the being back through time and space to cause the effective invasion of this force. Next minute, she's sitting up, bang, back in present day. I'm a Roman Catholic. Reincarnation doesn't exist. And I said, well, it's neither metamorphosis, but you're doing it. Come back in 2 weeks' time, I'll show you one of my students. I'll send you back on their behalf. Because her belief system overrode her spirit straight away. See, remember, this is a molecular mortal world. So therefore, you have the right to your assumptions and beliefs that will override your spirit while you have those assumptions and beliefs. This is why a lot of clients...
The spirit won't interfere with that.
No, it won't. It won't interfere with anything. It says, I'm here for you. Tell me what you want. If you've got a belief and an assumption, then you've got the right to override me because you don't listen to me anyway.
So the soul kind of carries these beliefs.
Yes,
and the spirit allows that. It allows whatever experiences the soul wants to have, good or bad or otherwise. But ultimately, if you're able to connect with spirit, then you can allow spirit to lead and guide and to create for you, rather than allowing the soul to kind of do that. Is that sort of what you're saying?
Yes and no. The word you just said, lead and guide, I wouldn't quite use it that way. Your spirit's there for you. Right. It's not going to guide. But if you tell it what you want and let go of it, it says, I'm not here to do the work for you, but if you take the step in that direction, I'll lay the universe out ahead of you and prepare it for you. It's really there working for you.
Yeah.
That makes a lot of sense.
In my own life, it's just like I got to let go and let my mind stop arranging things and thinking and plotting and just give it to spirit and say, here's the idea, you fill it. I have to throw my hands up.
See, when the mind's working, that's the soul. Now, what takes place here is that your thought becomes a thought form, it now evolves into a life form. The moment it reaches the life form status, it has the right to survive. The tree knows the tree, the grass knows it's a grass, the dog knows it's a dog. The thought only knows the thought that created it. Just say it's anger. That's all it knows. For its survival, it has to rearrange the universe to conform more situations to trigger the anger. Now, as you react to it, it's learning about you. In other words, you are the host now for your own creation. But as it learns about you by your reactors, it's growing, it's evolving, it's learning. And eventually it moves to the next status point where it becomes the internal entity. Now, once it reaches that point, compulsive disorder, multiple personality, schizophrenia, bipolar. You get all these other labels they put on it, but what it is purely simply you have created from the thought, you've trapped energy in this universe, energy that was free to enter, free to leave and free to flow, but once you capture that energy, it's no longer free, it now becomes trapped, but it's alive, because everything's alive, reproducing itself for its own survival. Eventually it wants to take over you, plus your vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
There's the compulsions.
and it all begins because it's basically self-created. Then it's
correct.
We're just not consciously aware that we're creating it.
Sometimes we are consciously aware by what we're hanging on to.
But
yeah, I mean, this is the beauty about this universe. It says, look, I couldn't care less what you do. I couldn't care less what you create. But you must be responsible for your thought, for your word, for your deed and your actions. If you want to go to war and you want to mutilate and kill, the universe says, well, that's fine. But you must learn what it's like to be mutilated and killed so you understand the creation you've created within this universe so it can come into balance.
do you find that is a unpopular message in today's codependent world where we're always looking for something external of us to blame? It's the powers that be, it's Illuminati, it's our neighbor,
Spot on. You know, and that's part of how it's designed. You know, the whole idea is to disempower you so you give your power to something outside of you. The moment you give power to something outside of you, they have the ability to access your soul and manipulate you and keep you in the game. It's about understanding responsibility of your thought, your word, your deed and your actions, taking responsibility for your actions, and then making changes to those actions to change your whole dimension.
Personal responsibility, Shelley.
Yeah,
Something you're very big on.
Very big on that. And well, that's where our power's at. It's like if I allow somebody else to manage me, I'm going to let anything manage me. You know.
Well, that's correct. But here's an interesting thing, Shelley. What takes place? What takes place is we've found that when we go back with people to find out where do these things come from, and just say, example in the last life, you were a bit of a rat bag to your kids, let's just say. So you're violent to your kids. Then you're going to come back here to parents that can be violent to you as a child, so you learn the creation of what you've created. But when you come back and you've got violent parents, oh, I don't like this, I don't want to be here. The moment you don't want to be here and you put out I don't want to be here, metaphysically, the first is the law of intent. That intent of not wanting to be here is now an invitation for something that does. I wish I was dead. Mm-hmm. That's an invitation for something that wants to live. I wish I had a friend. That's an invitation for a little friend to appear and eventually take over the child. That's how subtle it is. The first law of intent.
That is a huge message that we see out in what I loosely term the New Age bullshit, is everybody says they don't want to be here. They want to be taken off the planet. They want to...
That's correct.
It's
no longer subtle anymore. It's everybody says, I don't want to be here.
Yep, and these are the same people that actually do get taken over. They're the same people that have been abducted through time, because what we've found, the abduction stuff, was way back in time, go back thousands of years ago. A person may not have wanted to be here, and they therefore put out the intent, I don't want this body, I don't want to be here, wish I was dead, or whatever the case may be, but they made an agreement. And that agreement's still valid through time and space. I've found that they're the same people that have been abducted today that have been abducted lifetime after lifetime, till we eventually unfold time and space back in time to the time when they made that agreement. And we change that dimension, loop time, put them outside time. That stops abduction.
That was actually one of my questions for you, Steve, was you had to deal with any cases where clients have come in seeking help or assistance with experiences they were having with ETs and abductions and that kind of thing?
Hundreds. I started, 20 years ago, some of my first cases, I went down, first was the UFO stuff I was looking at, and that led me into other things, and I started dealing with, I was running a very big health centre here, and I had people come from all around the world. I was one of the only people in the world that was actually getting results. And to do that, I'd go back to the original cause, the effect agreement of entrapment. Sometimes we go back hundreds of thousands of years. Sometimes we went back to events of trauma that happened over a million years ago. They weren't even in human bodies at the time. A million years ago, they were these beings, webbed fingers, webbed toes, reptilian appearance. But massive trauma took place. And these beings that are still being traumatised by that trauma is still in the body today. But when they come down to the new body, there's an agreement made. And that's the same agreement that's been going through time till we change those agreements. I mean, I had a beauty the other day. I was in Sydney, and I had a man come to me because no one's been able to help him. He flew in, and he's actually originally from the UK. He came from the UK, and what took place is on my table. The next minute, his eyes have gone back at the back of his head. His eyes look at him, and just all you see are whites. No eyes there at all, whites. His hands change shape. They change shape in the form of three fingers. His feet change shape. His jaw changed shape. Next minute, I got this being talking out of him in its own language. Speak to me in English. Next minute, he's talking to me in English. And it had mass trauma online from events that had taken place on its own dimension, but somehow it had been trapped in this dimension, in this body. And it just wanted to get out. It wanted out. It wanted to go back home. It didn't want to be there. But the shape-shifting that was taking place with the thing was fully morphing and speaking in a whole new language. I've seen similar things because I've had 18 people that went back to the same era of time where this thing had before in the past. That's not unusual. I mean, sometimes I have these things sitting up and hissing and spitting at me, it doesn't, look, nothing surprises me anymore. The things I see on the table, just, let's do it and just get the job done. Let's deal with it and clear them off and, clear the person up. We understand how it is. I mean, I've been doing this for 40 odd years. To me, it's just another day in the office.
Just a walk in the park, huh?
Yeah, that's it. So the first time students see the big stuff coming up, they jump back 10 feet. you got to laugh sometimes because, they hear about it, understand, but some of them have never seen the big boys. But when they come up in bodies, it's an eye-opener.
So how do you kind of ensure safety of everyone in that room? If you're running a training course and you're bringing in, as you call them, big boys.
I'm not bringing them in.
Obviously you feel...
Let's get this straight. I'm not bringing them in. They're in the body.
Right,
I'm bringing them up to the surface.
Right.
And before I even do that, I use a mathematical formula. I'm not going to explain that on air because I don't want people out there going out and trying to do what we're doing.
Right.
Because this is real dangerous. If you don't know what you're doing,
we'll try to.
I'll explain a couple of dangers in a minute what took place. So what I do is I take control of the game. I now trap them in my game. Whereas in my early days, I got picked up and thrown 30 feet through the air by an invisible force onto a lounge. I land on the lounge, so okay, I get the head, I wait. I wasn't afraid, I was fascinated. Okay, how'd that happen? Today I understand. I invaded its game and it just threw me out of the game. Today, I trapped them in my game, knowing the difference.
Right. And that's the key to what you're doing, isn't it?
It is. As I've had many clients on the table say, this thing just wanted to smash you in the face, but couldn't get through the energy. Because once it's locked in your energy, it's in your field, this is it. You've got him in, and the field you're dealing with, virtually you've got total control over the scenario that's taking place.
I think that's where a lot of people who are doing or attempting similar things might be getting it wrong. They haven't learnt that lesson about bringing them into your game, not you entering into their game where they have control. And, you've got to play by their rules.
That is how the game has kept going on and on and on for thousands of years, is because people are like, I need to go into shamanic battle and go in and, go into their game and battle them on their battlefield. And that is what kept the game going for so long.
Yeah, and you become a target in the game when you're doing that because you really don't know the rules. And eventually what happens, a lot of those people end up getting taken over.
Yep.
Oh.
I find there's a lot of alternative health systems out there and, structures. People are going into rituals and, initiations and things people are going to thinking it's a, great new modality and it's going to help them. And I find they're just entering the game of another. And remember one thing, he who enters the game of another subject laws the game. Now, that also takes us to the degree. He who's born under the dimension of another is governed by the laws of that dimension. So, now think about that for a moment. Just say you're in a secret society and your old man, he's gone through initiation of the rituals. He's working his way up through the secret society. Each time he goes through his ritual, then what takes place, another entity, more powerful one, is taking over each level of it. But eventually what happens is that the firstborn son has what's known as the born rights to these beings. What's that mean? That means when the spirit enters the body at birth, so does the draconian. What's that mean? It means it has to create trauma for the spirit so it can take over. Once it creates trauma for the spirit and takes over the vehicle, then it'll keep the trauma going through initiations and rituals and other form, drugs, so it can stay in control of the vehicle up through time.
That still goes back to it creating a safe environment for itself.
Well, it's getting first is the mathematical formula. The first is the law of intent, and second is the law of agreement. Now, what happens is that, you know, the universe is based on, as I said, the mathematical formula. 7 years represents a change. So the first 7 years is the spirit coming through and bringing through issues online. The next 7 years, 7 to 14, is the time where you really don't have any more say over your children. This is a free will choice of the child. This is why the church gets them to, well, what's running the churches, get them to reinforce themselves through confirmation, 14, confirm themselves to these beings. You've got to understand how the game, 7 years old, why do they dress them up in a bridal gown and marry them off in what's known as a common union or communion? You really don't understand who's running the game on this. Anything you enter and you belong to, you've got to remember, what's the word belong? It comes from slavery. A slave is acknowledging to belong to its master. Well, whenever you belong to something else or belong to an entity, that's exactly what takes place. I mean, one of the things I remember years ago I was reading up on, and one of the popes, I think it was about 1211 or something around that time, and anyway, what happened to the Pope was he ordered one of his generals into the village to slaughter every man, woman and child in the village. And the general turned and said, "But your Holy One, do you have many good Christians in the village?" The Pope turned and looked, because it was all about real estate, you see. Turned and looked, he said, "Slaughter them all, for their gods will know their own." So who belongs to who? And who's transferring one asset to another? So when you go from one group to another, you're really just entering another being and another game that you'll be manipulated into.
So then our entire existence is then set up to be just a constant manipulation between not just entities but each other.
Well, it just goes further, and in the physical reality, the moment you're born, you know, you're a chattel. You can be sold. You can be bought. There's a price on you. You really don't understand what man really is until he becomes free as a spirit.
And that's why the stuff you're teaching with holographic kinetics is so important. You know, having an understanding of the laws of law and laws of agreement and entrapment, all of these things. You know, if you have awareness of that stuff, you can kind of, you know, at least do your best to avoid some of those things.
Be mindful of what, yeah, because I see myself making little agreements to myself during the day, you know, and then I realize I'm walking myself into I'm creating a thought form with this. That every time.
Okay, now, Shelley, here's the question. Okay. To make an agreement can only be made between two parties. So who's the other party you're making the agreement with?
Yeah, that's
right.
A good question. That goes back to their mind and to, you know, there's something that in there that's trying to get me to make an agreement, and I'm just mindlessly doing it until I stop myself. So, yeah, it's very unconscious. It's so innocuous and innocent seeming, you know. It's like, well, I'll sit here and listen to this program, and then, you know, then I'll get up and do some real work, like productive work. Well, then every time I sit down to enjoy myself, I start creating guilt because I'm not doing something productive, and then I realize I'm making this agreement.
Okay.
And it's
what you
very
just said.
Seeming. It's not huge, you know, like earth-shattering or anything, but it's like, wow, you are going down the road of good intentions right to hell right here. So, I can imagine for people who are not at all aware of any of this, how they just keep walking into it all the time. You know, I mean, I'm holding on by the seat of my britches because I'm partially aware of this, But then you look at...
And a lot of people, I'll tell you now, a lot of people out there think they're aware. I mean, come on, I get people coming in there, they're into all these different forms of drugs. They're telling me how enlightening they are. And I'm not kidding, if they're enlightening, then I hate to see someone who's not. Because when you get them on the table...
You're talking about like ayahuasca.
That's one of them, yeah. And I've seen some big attachments that come through and have taken over bodies for some of that stuff. Drugs open wormholes to other dimensions. Like it or not, that's what it does. You enter their world, they have a right now to enter your world. That's reciprocal exchange of energy. That's the balance of the universe. So if you go into their dimension...
That's the agreement.
Yeah, that's the agreement. You go to their world, they can come into your world.
So it's basically what we are responsible for what we create. We created it, so now we have to take responsibility for it in some fashion.
Certainly, but one of the things you said earlier, Shelley, was the fact that you feel guilty.
Yes.
Unrest. So that now tells me that there's a program online with you that's coming from somewhere earlier in your life.
Exactly.
That's alive as a life form that's reproducing itself. So you feed the life form by feeling guilty. You're feeding it. It's growing. It's eventually trying to take over you if it hasn't already.
Correct. Yes, and that is correct. That went actually back to childhood, and until I actually had a chance to actually go back there and see where all these little weird things were coming from that were in my life, and I found a considerable lot of symptoms. In the present time, I call them symptoms. There's symptoms of something going on, and it was going back to childhood programming. So
that's it. But let me just explain something. By going back and looking at it, you are going back to look at the experiences over the soul. You're not changing the dimension.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Understand? So it's still online. You can look at it. You understand it's there. It's like the prisoners. Look, you sit in the prison system. I sat on 8 weeks we went through and sat in a court case and watched every case going through. And I hear all the kids and their spirits talking out of them. The judge sums up and says, what do you have to say for yourself? I don't know, Your Honour, why I keep doing the same thing over and over. He's telling me he's stuck in time.
Right.
I don't know, Your Honour, when I have a few beers, it's like something takes over. It does. They're not listening.
So, let me recapture my chain of thought here. Some of the examples that we've had so far, like about abduction and things of that nature, are there circumstances where perhaps they're not so obvious? We don't have extreme, shape shifting or abduction or anything like that, but it just causes sort of a general dysfunction in someone's existence. Like what you said a few minutes ago about going into the same pattern, that might be so subtle you don't even, you might just chalk it up as part of life.
That's correct. My thing is, as I look, sometimes people bring in, matter of fact, I got an email the other day and it broke me records. I say to people, well, send me a list of the things you've got. And someone emailed me with 245 things on their list. Well, wow. I mean, I don't have all year. I mean, this is it. My thing is, look, basically what's affecting you in the now. Whatever's affecting you now has a cause, that effect. Let's ask your spirit where it comes. Let's go and find out. Let's change that dimension. That's as simple as what this is. Go and look at the dimension, change the dimension, and once we unfold time and space, it will actually loop itself and put you outside time. It gives you a new time track.
You shift your own timeline. For the more that you clear this out, the more your present changes.
Of course, because remember, every time, the way the universe looks at things, it says, look, you create whatever you want. This is a physical molecular world. You chose to come down here in a physical molecular vehicle called a body. Mm-hmm. Whatever games you want to play and whatever you want to do, fine. You go, you play them, you create what you want, you create all these experiences, but be responsible for your thought, your word, your deed and your action, because no man will escape the cycles of time. Whatever's taken place must unfold back onto you somewhere through time. Now, the old Aboriginals, I hear a lot of people saying they're into revenge killing. No, they weren't. They're doing you a favour. What used to take place is if you killed someone in the Aboriginal community, then you'd be put up against a wall or out in the bush there, and all family would stand and take a spear and they'd all throw a spear at you. If they hit you, they hit you. If they killed you, they killed you. If they didn't, they didn't. It was dealt with now. Because they knew in 500 or 1,000 years' time, that moment would have to unfold back into itself. and you'd have to be spared for the balance in the future. So they dealt with it in the now, finished. That's it. So they're doing you a favour. That was the old
And
way.
these people would willingly do that because of their knowledge and understanding of those laws.
Correct. Correct. Yep. They would accept law because that was the way it was.
I'm just wondering how many people out there these days would accept the same.
Well,
probably not too many.
Well, the old saying, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. Well, the reality is, whatever you've done to harm another, it's going to come back onto you regardless. Until you're remorseful for what you've actually done. And then, once you've learnt the lesson, well, the universe then turns out and says, well, all right, it creates 360 degrees. You see, 360 degrees represents completion. But the moment it loops itself for that dimension of time, it's going to put you outside time and create a new dimension for the future cycle.
It is very difficult. This in our new age beliefs and all this wacky stuff that's dawning on the horizon and what people call spirituality. It is very difficult to know when you're, so many people are crying foul and crying harm and oh my gosh, you hurt me and that was awful, and it's almost as if that's part of the program too. So we don't know what real harm is from staged outrage. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
That happens mainly when you're asking people to take responsibility for their own actions and emotions and feelings and thoughts and whatever they're sort of projecting, out there. That's when they become defensive and they don't want to take responsibility for it. They want to project it all onto you or something else that's sort of outside of themselves.
When they say, "Well, you're hurting my feelings," and you're like, "Well, am I truly causing you harm?" Because I'm asking you to look at where your power lies at. So am I actually harming someone, or am I just saying, this is where your power's at? It sounds to me like it's more of this program playing into creating this environment where it remains safe.
Okay, let's just have a look how the program actually works. Now, in the universe, you see, thoughts have energy, and they have power. And when you catch that free-flowing energy, it creates realities. So all life is energy. It's free to enter, free to leave, and free to flow. And every belief or thought and the way we interpret, it actually captures a free-flowing energy. So where's the energy come from first? Well, first off is the earth is the mother, but you can't have life without the father. The father is the sun. And from the sun come electrons. We actually capture electrons in the thought form as inverted electromagnetic energy flux. This spirals into us through a mathematical formula. It then, once it goes to the mathematical formula, it crystallizes into the cellular level of the being with its memory. Now there's the thought form, the life form. It's now been created for its reproduction of its own existence, using you as a host. Once it's locked in there, and you act and you react to it, with the action and reaction that cause the effect, you're reacting, you're actually swinging between the pendulum. While you're swinging between the pendulum, action, reaction, cause and effect is stuck in time. The moment the pendulum settles down, you realise you don't need to create this, and you don't need to have this created on you, and you can be at point zero as an observer.
Okay.
What then takes place at the observer point, you can then move through time. You cannot move through time when you're stuck in the pendulum because that's blocking you from moving through time. So while people are into the blame game, they're actually creating stuck in time moments of time.
Living in the past, even. So.
Yeah, those events, and they're in your soul, they've been programmed into your soul. You're letting them run you, you're letting them manipulate you, and letting them create this, you being stuck in time because of your action and reaction to them.
So we have this does have some bearing then on our emotional bodies where we go into these reactive states.
But what the reactive states are is, it is the life form in your cells seeking its own survival and using you as the host.
Uh-huh.
You created the parasite.
Exactly.
It's only trying to survive in this universe, which it has a right to once it's been created. So by rearranging...
It needs to feed, so it wants to
That's it.
It wants to recreate what created it.
That's it.
Because that's what it feeds on.
That's all it
so
knows.
It's looping itself, and it's repeating the same cycle over and over again.
Correctly.
Why the same things seem to happen over, happen over and again. Nothing ever changes. And you keep going, and we can see that reflected out in the greater world as well, where the same thing keeps, we have another war, we got another idiot president, we got another, it's just constant, the same thing, different, the names and faces change, but the same thing keeps happening over and over again. And, we're not progressing, or we're not getting over our problems in a collective sense.
No, we're stuck in time.
Yeah.
We've just become totally stuck in allowing the life form to reproduce itself, which is taken. And we say, why do I keep doing these things? Well, remember, we did create them, and we're feeding them. Every time we react, we're feeding them.
We're not addressing the original trauma that created that thought form or, emotional response that created that at the time. So that is that effectively what we need to be doing?
We need to be addressing the original cause of that effect. Mental health does not look at the cause of an effect. All that's doing is giving you medication that dumbs and numbs you. When it dumbs and numbs you, it makes your defences even weaker. Then it lets other beings in because your defences are down. And when you start coming off the medication, these other beings can now become active in you, and you're worse and you're worse. They give you more medication. It's a catch-22 situation.
So that's
they know these things exist.
Recreating another problem over and over again. It just keeps cycling over and over. The only thing that's really happening is you just keep doing the same thing that keeps the...
You just become a commodity. You become a commodity for the drug companies.
Right. Now, so it seems like, we're creating our own matrix then. That one that everybody's complaining about, we're caught in the matrix, how we get out. Well, it's because we're then creating it, recreating it over and over again.
That's right.
It's ours.
We have the ability.
We need to take responsibility for it.
It's not their matrix, it's our matrix. So that would say if we own it, we should have power over it.
That's correct, and we do, but we're choosing. People are choosing to hang on to the issues that they're reacting. The moment you react to anything, stop and just say, why am I reacting to this? And all of a sudden your spirit might just give you a flash of something happened when you're 5 years old.
Sure.
And all of a sudden you can recall, okay, well, I don't need that anymore, spirit, thank you. Maybe blow off the time track and replace that moment of time the way you'd like it to be.
So now that we're looking at matrix creation, I know that we have gone over this a little bit before about how, in the general population, the world, how many people are affected by this?
Oh, at least 80%, maybe more. I mean, everybody's going to have programs running, I'll tell you that now. The moment you took this physical vehicle, and the moment you grew up, the day you're born, the external world's programming, your mother's programming you, the church is programming you. You go to school, sit down, shut up and speak when you're spoken to. It's about programming the spirit. It's suppressing the spirit and then putting a new program that you only talk when you're spoken to.
Yeah, it does. So we are in an environment now of 24-hour-a-day programming. We've got radio programming and TV programming and it's like constant psychic influence on us, advertising and drugs. It's a constant bombardment. So
how do we move past that, Steve? Like Shelley just said, it's everywhere. It's constantly bombarding us. What sort of practical things can individuals do?
I have actually found that when you talk to spirit and you communicate, once you get to communicate with your spirit, just tell it not to take things on that you don't personally make the choice to take on. You see, what it does, it allows you to take on anything that lands on your skin. It allows you to take on. Anything projected, it allows you to take on. Because subconsciously, you're not consciously being aware of it. Therefore, you're not subconsciously making the choice that you don't want it. You just allow it. So your spirit says, well, you haven't told me not to, so therefore I assume you must want it because you're taking it in. Yeah. But the moment you say, okay, I don't want anything that's going to influence me that I don't particularly want, so therefore anything that comes in outside, don't let it affect you. Got a lot of static in the background right now coming up.
Yeah, I'm hearing a little bit of that.
Okay, let me turn off my mic for a second and see if it's coming from me. Yeah, I'm going to keep my mic muted until I have something to say, and then I'm going to turn off some static makers in here while I'm doing it. So,
Right.
But I do have a question that maybe it's a statement. Today's spirituality, which a lot of it is just refabricated, like, Christianity, all dusted off and made love and lighty. It really has a lot of the same core beliefs.
Sure.
I do see a lot of modalities that are about installing more constructs into a person rather than clearing them out. And some of this is like what is loosely called shamanic healing, where they're like installing constructs like, lions and tigers and bears into the chakra system. And it seems to be, it's got to be aggravating the problem rather than abating it. That is quite a kind of an uphill battle as we get more and more of these belief systems that really are based on they're just refurnished or redusted off Christianity and corrupted Buddhism and things like that. But it all really goes back down to clearing then rather than adding in.
And that's correct. And as I said, there are a lot of people out there, practitioners out there, that, in their own reality, they feel they're doing the right thing. But in the modalities they're using, there's a lot of people getting some good work done with the soul and changing the soul, changing the programs of the soul, which helps temporarily with a lot of the things. Sometimes that program will actually deprogram and reprogram, so purely simply does make some good changes to the physical world of reality. But it's not accessing the major portion, which is the invisible world, where spirit knows why it was set up and where it originated from. And remember, that origin could go back thousands of years. It could go back to a genetic line. I mean, I look at some of the things in America today, and I say, okay, there's a lot of conflict between the dark people and the light people, white people. And if you go back a few hundred years ago, and you got a little lady in Africa having tea, and all of a sudden the white dudes come in and shoot the men, rape the women, put them in chains, take them across in ships and sell them into slavery. What was the trauma in the great-great-great-great-grandmother? And you take the fact that they have about 8 children each level, and by the time you get down about 7, 8 generations, you're in the millions. That now has affected all the genetic line born under that original event. When you backtrack through time to the original cause of that ancestor and you bring them through on the table, they'll have their trauma online. We now get them to change the trauma of that dimension. Loop time, change it, replace time, put them outside time.
That's a collective trauma then. I mean, like a trauma that many, many of us have shared previously, like slavery, maybe even, living in a country that was destroyed by either catastrophe or invading forces. I mean, then you're going into collective trauma. It's not just personal trauma anymore where something happened to you. Now we're going into that collective sense of, it's interesting because slavery has been coming up for me a lot lately as things to ponder as far as, how is the effects of, maybe, how many countries have we had that have been enslaved? We enslaved Africa. Ireland was enslaved. They moved to a Native America. And then the Aboriginal people there in Australia. So we're talking a lot of population that has experienced generational enslavement.
And behind all of that, as I said, if we go back to the great-great-great-great-grandmother, where this took place from Africa, then you understand the conflict today, because in the genetics of the soul is the bitterness and anger that took place way back in time. When you access the ancestor back in time and you loop time and you change time, morphogenic resonance takes place and it clears the whole generation of that trauma down through time. Now, the other thing we've done here was, this was about traumatizing the spirit and once more programming their souls and giving access to other beings to the soul.
Right.
Dan, before we start moving into, make sure I don't say it wrong, conjunction.
You got it.
Function. Do you have any more questions as far as, what we've talked about before and what we planned on asking
Well, there's plenty more questions. Do you want to go to one of those other questions beforehand? We can, number of things we still haven't covered yet.
There's one thing in particular that I'm personally interested in, and that's how Steve is able to access spirit and create those lines of communication. I'm just wondering if Steve might be able to talk a little bit about that, give us some clues on what people might be able to do or start thinking about that will help them to get back in touch and connected with spirit.
Okay, the simplest part is first off to acknowledge and recognise that, you really are a spirit moving through time, and this is a vehicle that you've got. Get back the essence of you. Start to communicate with the essence of you. Tell her what you want, thank it when it does things for you. And with that acknowledgement, it will start to acknowledge you. Unless you acknowledge something in life, it's not going to acknowledge you. But the moment you acknowledge it, it will acknowledge you. So to me, the simplest part is to start to acknowledge that, your spirit is really the essence of you that's moving through time. You are part of the vehicle right now with all the memories in it of experiences. And you're living this experience this moment of time, but down the track, the spirit's going to keep living on, and it'll take another vehicle in the future. At the moment, we can acknowledge it and thank it, tell what we want, and let go of it. Don't focus on it, just let go of it. While you focus, you actually put resistance, and it's not going to be able to manifest realities. You can only manifest realities when there's no blocks there for it to move through time and space to manifest those realities. There's a lot of keys, but I can't, I won't give you a lot of the keys because I teach my students the keys and they've got to be taught correctly. Sometimes you find too many cowboys out there and they'll try and take something and utilise it and think they understand it, but, you have no idea of some things I've seen over the years when people try to play around with things they don't understand.
You need not say anymore. I've seen it a zillion times where, I completely understand. So, whatever, maybe something in a general sense rather than, there is something I want to ask you though is, when you're not doing your work and maybe you're just out maybe with people or you're not actually doing a session, do you notice that, people will almost speak subconsciously and even though you're not really doing a session, what is really kind of going on with them?
Steve told me a great story about that yesterday actually when we were Skyping. Are you able to retell that one, Steve?
Well, which one was it first? I got the many of them.
You got a lot of stories, don't you? It was one where I think you were walking down the Brisbane Mall, and you had the guy that you sort of took one look at and just went, holy dooly.
Yeah, that's it. I see the guy is about well over 150 feet away. He's walking up and he looks like he's in his 60s, 70s, but I could see the features, the entities in his face. I thought, oh, look at the entity in this guy. And because the moment I spotted it, it spotted me. And, so he's walking up, he's got a bag over his shoulder, he wraps the bag around his shoulder, he leans back. I'm walking in a straight line, I just shake my head and I think, you've got no idea what you're dealing with here. The guy swings the bag back, swings it up, and he swings the bag at me. I don't deter, I'm not, I have no fear whatsoever. I'm just walking straight down the line because I just know things are getting taken care of. Next when the bag stops in midair, he's picked up and he's thrown on his arse 15 foot along the footpath. I just kept walking straight line, shaking my head and thinking, fool, you have no idea what you're dealing with. The spirit's very powerful and it will take care of you. The moment you start working with it. And this is one of the things other beings are afraid of. We as humans are very powerful spirits. And we as humans can harness energy. What they're after is the energy in the universe for themselves. Whereas if we communicate with our spirit, we have the ability to harness energy in this universe to utilise for ourselves, our energy.
And that's some powerful stuff, and I fully appreciate what you said before about not wanting to necessarily give away all the keys to unlocking that kind of
a little
information.
Is dangerous.
Oh, for sure.
In the wrong hands.
For sure. Well, I'll explain this case. This is how powerful these beings are. They know what's going on. So I'm going up to one of the Aboriginal communities up north, and they've got about 13 kids on suicide watch. So I'm heading up there, and the woman organised me to go up there. She's in Cairns. I get there at 6 o'clock in the morning. At 4:30, her son hangs himself. They took her out of the equation. The new woman takes over to get me up to Cooktown. I get there the next morning, her daughter hangs herself. You cut her down, she's still alive. Put her on the table, and the first thing that comes up is an entity. And the first thing that says out of her body is, you can't have her, she's mine. I'll take her tomorrow, I'll take her next week, she's mine. My comment straight away, if you bug it, you'll be out of here in 5 minutes, step aside. I went in and found out why she wanted to commit suicide. I then went in after Annie dealt with him. 5 years later, 3 little kids, and she's doing great. You know, we then went up to community work on the kids, 13 kids on suicide. So after working on the kids, I said to my Aboriginal sister, and I put her on the table, and I said, Spirit went to scan the community, what's taking the kids out? Whoa, I haven't seen this one before. I said, well, what is he? He's like a big jellyfish with tentacles. Thank you. How far does he go back? Pompeii. What's he linked to? Alcohol. Thank you. How's he linked? As they drink alcohol, it latches onto them, works down the tentacles and gets them to commit suicide and absorbs the soul. Thank you. So I collectively bring all the spirits through, collectively independently on their own separate dimensions of time. I unfold time and space and dimensions. I then loop time and change the dimension for the future so it can't take place. Then I release the spirits. And this thing goes, shrinks to nothing. We're locked in another dimension. 14 months later, I go back to the Aboriginal community, and the community police come to me, the special police in these communities, you see, come to me. And they said, you know, before you came here, we were averaging 3 attempted suicides a week. We have not one attempted suicide over 14 months since you did our community. This guy was a cluster. Now watch this. Cluster's another level above that again. So above the ND comes a cluster. Cocaine, cluster. Heroin, cluster. Ice, cluster. Alcohol, cluster. The ganja, cluster. LSD, cluster. These beings are entities in another dimension that are inlining the masses of similarity. In other words, like attracts like. And they're drawn under this particular entity. And he's now controlling them like a puppet on a string through his own dimension. And he becomes what's known as a cluster. Now, I'm finding him, at times, running whole communities. Have been running whole communities for over 300 years till we take him out. I've found him linked to family suicides down the line, where he's been created and he's grown on another level now, and he's linking all the generations. So that's another fellow, another dimension that, again, very little is known of.
That is interesting because you see that, I mean, historically you see those kind of, that cluster effect in the Irish who were, you know, assimilated by the Anglo-Saxons, and then you've seen it here in the Americas with the Native American experience. The cluster effect, like you were saying, it's all very, it seems to, there's a pattern of it globally. And
well, it's funny because when I was over in the East Coast, echoing again. When I was over,
are you able to mute yourself there, Shelley?
Yeah. When I was over on the East Coast, a Native American, I was taken down, introduced to him, and he's got this big area of all this timber in his backyard, and he does carvings. And I walked into his house, and here's this massive carving of this big jellyfish with tentacles and eyes all around it. And I looked at it and said, who did that? He said, I did. Well, I said, okay. I said, you tell me, what's that mean to you? He said, it's a cluster. I said, yeah, the only other person I know apart from me and my students that know what this thing is. He said, oh yeah, we're aware of them. So it's interesting. The Native Americans are aware of these beings as well.
So this wasn't an isolated case.
Oh yeah, I've got one here at home
sitting happening all over
on my desk in a glass jar with him inside. He's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He's got 7 eyes all around him. This guy, he sees in all direction. Yeah, fascinating little being.
Crazy.
And this is where our system today. It isn't looking at interdimensional stuff at all. It's not looking at it. You know, I mean, come on. How can you clear things? You know, mental health is supposed to be out there assisting people with mental health issues. Why is it when something goes wrong, they bring these experts in that are experts in why something doesn't exist? And they're not getting results, and they have nothing that does exist in this field, but they're the experts explaining why something doesn't exist. It's got me freaked how they do that.
Yeah, I think it's important to create a space for this type of, you know, looking at what we can't see.
Well, I'll tell you right now, with this, we could turn the prison system around. We could turn mental health around, and I'll tell you now, you've got 100,000 soldiers over there suffering mental trauma that's not being dealt with. I know what's going on, and we could clear a lot of those soldiers as well with the system.
I know you said the other day, Steve, on a Skype chat that we were having, that you've had some clients that have actually been referred to you from psychiatrists who have some awareness of this stuff, but possibly don't want to risk their own credibility within their, profession and, the other psychiatrists around them and that kind of thing. But some of them are starting to refer people like that to you because they're aware that, it's something they're just not capable of dealing with, and they know that you can. Are you able to talk about that a little bit at all, or?
Well, yes, that's just one area. I mean, I'll give you an example here of one recently, and this one here was actually involving the neurologist who was aware of these dimensions, and they had one of the women. She actually works for the Queensland Health, you see, and her daughter, she'd been throwing epileptic fits every 2.5 hours for 6 months. She's been to see psychiatrists, psychologists, counsellors, neurologists, neurosurgeons. The neurologist is saying, we can't see anything physically wrong. We have no idea what this is. And talking to the mother, he said, look, it could be something interdimensional. We don't know. So anyway, she brought the girl down to me, put her on the table, went back to an event when she was 9 years old. That triggered a sleeper. Sleeper is an event from the past that's now been active. Oh, in the past, an entity jumped in and was trying to jump her. Every time I try to jump in, she throws an epileptic fit. I took the entity out. She'd been back at school now for over a year without a fit. One session. And there's 6 months. Mm-hmm. What did that cost the government in fees for 6 months?
What did it cost the client in, psychiatrist bills and things like that? Years and years and years worth.
Yeah, but remember, a lot of time the governments...
And getting nowhere with it.
A lot of time, too, the governments end up, paying subsidies for all these. So, I mean, millions could be saved with governments if they were to stop and to broaden the horizon and to look at things. The Children's Hospital, I was talking to one of the head doctors there, because I've been called in the Children's Hospital to work on people there. I've been called into the prisons. I've worked in high security prisons and mentally insane. I get results every time we go there. Now, what happened is in Children's Hospital, very more than 50% of the kids that go through there's nothing physically that they can see wrong with them. I guarantee a lot of those kids are bringing trauma through from the past because they set up in the first 7 years. I'll give you a little example. I've got a little 4-year-old boy. He's in Melbourne. Parents sleep with him at night because he wakes up screaming, his body's shaking, he's in a cold sweat, sometimes he's jerking up and down the body. Normally you look at it and you think this guy's got a big entity in him. But, wasn't an entity. Went in, put the mother on the table, and surrogate little spirit of the little boy into the mother. She's in England driving a train on a one-way track. Another train coming the other way, had a head-on collision. He was killed. His 4-year-old son on the train was killed. Another kids on the train were killed. The moment he hit 4 years old, it triggered off the sleeper. And he's trying to stop the train because his son was killed at 4 years old on the train. In his sleep, he's trying to stop the train. The moment we
reliving that experience.
And we cleared it. He's sleeping nice and peaceful now at night. That's just some of the stuff. And then you talk, not just that, you get spirits now in people. And this is fascinating because if you're responsible for the death of an animal or death of a person, you see, and again, we'll go back, Aboriginal culture, they'd sit down at night in the dream time. They'd call through the spirit of the kangaroo. It would donate its vehicle. The next day, there's the kangaroo. The soul is in fight or flight, but the spirit donates the vehicle and eats your lunch. Thank you. Spirit moves to a higher octave. Now, if you kill something, either a human or an animal without permission, then that activates reciprocal exchange of energy under universal law. It says, you destroyed his vehicle so he can have your vehicle. So now he jumps in your body. I've had soldiers of war after the Vietnam War, 40 years of mental trauma. And I have spirits of Viet Cong talking out of the body to enfold time and space and release the spirit, and mental trauma instantly disappears. I've had a woman in a car accident. Now, what's this? This woman, she's had 3 spinal operations. She's come to see me because she's still riddled with pain. I put her on the table. The spirit said, 18, go there. Next minute, she's screaming hysterically on the table. I totally forgot what happened. I had a head-on collision in a car when I was 18. Thank you. What happened? The other woman died. Thank you. She was careless, and because she was careless, the other woman died. The spirit of the other woman's jumped in her. When I brought the spirit of the other woman, you should have heard her. Oh, the bitch, I'll fix you. She's saying, oh, she was so angry, this woman, because she was careless and killed her. So, my thing is, spirit, listen to me now. Everything's happening now, it's happened before. Everything's happening now, it'll happen again. You don't want this to happen next cycle of time, do you? No. This unfold time and space and change it. The moment I released the spirit out of her body, instantly, all the spinal issues disappeared. They weren't hers in the first place. But she had had 3 physical spinal operations to try and get rid of the pain.
Wow, this stuff is so amazing. You know, it would be really great if this sort of thing, you know, what you're doing could be acknowledged, you know, on a on a broad level.
I'm thinking Alzheimer's disease. You know, I mean, that becomes a little bit apparent. It's loss of oneself, loss of what nobody remembers who they are anymore, because you know, I mean, or Morgellons disease. If you're familiar with Morgellons.
Morgellons disease. Yeah. Well, I've actually, it's funny because I actually had a case that had Morgellons disease, and what happened? Again, you might.
Shelley, that distortion's coming through again. Sorry.
So what happened to Morgellons disease? So I said, well, look, it was a couple hundred miles away. I said, look, it's supposed to be contagious, so I don't really want you down here just in case. Well, I said, but give me permission to work on you. He got permission. I showed him to one of my other students, and I worked on him. And I treated it as a life form. I treated it as an entity itself. I let everything be alive. So I read it, I brought it up, spoke to it, went to cause effect why it was created, and I changed his program. And as an entity, I took him out. Within 2 weeks, the Morgellons cleared up.
Right.
These things are alive. Everything can be... Yeah, the thing we've got to understand is when we acknowledge something and we work with it, we'll work with its own intelligence. This takes us to a whole new level of understanding. If everything's alive, now we give another unusual case like this. This is one of hundreds. Woman's in from Argentina. She came in to see me. She can't sleep at night. She's on 2 lots of sleeping tablets. Well, my comment is, well, that makes sense. She said, what? She can't speak English, but her daughter's there. And her daughter speaks to mum, interprets, and, well, I said, you've got 2 lots of sleeping tablets, therefore you've got 2 entities. They need to keep you awake twice as long as normal before you feed them. Everything you take is alive, and everything needs to be fed. Antidepressants mean I'm going to make you depressed so you'll feed me. The cocaine, I make life miserable for you until you give me a hit. Look at it the other way, that everything's alive, and it takes you to a whole new area of understanding how these things are seeking their own survival in the being. So the moment we blew the frequency, then we didn't change the cause effect why she can't sleep. You know, 2 weeks later, daughter's rung me and she said, Mum's sleeping peaceful at night, no more sleeping tablets.
And that really is the crux of it, isn't it? The bit you said about everything being alive.
That's everything in nature is alive.
Mm-hmm.
And remember, I always refer back to the fact that I come from a culture that lived with nature for 60,000 years. It survived with nature alive for 60,000 years. White men come along and said, dirty little beast, put on some clothes. You know, you're going to be dead in 100 years if it's not for us. Well, I tell you what, for them, what they've done, I mean, my God, the communities today and the problems they've got because of the interference of our white society thinking it knows the answer to everything. You know, even here, look, I've gone up to what's known as, in Brisbane, it's called Atsichek. And Atsichek are where all the Queensland health workers have been trained. But they've been trained what's called traditional health. So, well, show me what's traditional about your traditional health. It's all about drugs and medication. There is not one traditional thing about it that's called traditional. You know? And all the Aboriginal staff are saying, why aren't we trained in this? And I say, well, you ask me. Go back to the elders, ask me. Go back to those that have been paid off and those up the line that are in positions of power that are being told and programmed that this is all witchcraft, this is all black magic, this is all, you need our system. And then go back and have a look what's happened to your system. You know, I have letters after letter after letter here. You know, for 13 years I've been teaching, but we've been writing to governments for years. And the amount of letters I've got of buck passing, I mean, by God, these politicians know how to buck pass. They pass on to one, pass on to another, and down the track, people have no idea what you're talking about. Then the psychiatrists have got their own game going. They don't want anything coming in that's going to get results. So they try putting blocks up in everything you do. That's part of the buck.
You said the other day that some of them have sort of invited you to come and participate in, you know, I'm not sure exactly what it was, but essentially what they were wanting you to do is to give away your information, and part of the contract that they wanted you to sign or something beforehand was that anything you tell them becomes their property, any
that's
information or
in one of the universities
unbelievable.
here, it wanted to do influence of alternative healing, or complementary healing as they call it. And I said, well, when you want to do something Aboriginal healing, let me know and I'll consider it. But meanwhile, they sent a thing out to sign, that is that all the information belongs to them and I gain absolutely nothing out of this research. Well, hang on. I've already done my 40 years of research. I've got all the information. I've got it here. I've had professors contact me and say, we want you to come down so we can assess the system you're using. And my comment is, you're not qualified. How can you assess it? You know nothing of it.
Mm.
So my thing is, look, I'm not giving it to them. I haven't given it to them. When they, and I'll tell you now, if any university took this on, it would lead the world. It would lead the world in new research.
Mm-hmm.
Because people coming from all around the world to learn this, as they are now, I mean, God, I've got people now in 24 countries that have flown in from 24 countries to learn this.
Yep.
And my thing was to take this, and remember, this Aboriginal culture of healing the spirit to the rest of the world. This is the ancient knowledge of the past which we need for our future.
I agree, Steve.
I do
Big
too.
time.
I think that it could be quite transformational. Well, probably at the very, very tip of the iceberg now, and now it just requires folks to carry the banner with it. I guess my next question is, because it keeps coming around again, are you ready, Dan, for the conjunction junction? What's your function?
Sure, yeah. Yep. Let's do this.
I was not privy to this conversation, and Dan just mentioned it to me briefly about an event or a phenomenon that you had indicated called a conjunction. And could you tell us a little bit about what you perceive this phenomenon or event to be, and how it ties in, or was learning and developing holographic kinetics what led you to this realization about this event called a conjunction?
Well, what takes place was that Aboriginal culture for 60,000 years has understood about the birth-death cycles of time. And through my teaching, I realised that everything is cycles of time. Everything. Even now, they're just discovering new things about the sun and the earth and the spiral through time and space that's taking place, which is really having an effect on every living thing. Because, we are. I look at us as being a fractal of the hologram. And when we change the fractal, it then changes the hologram. But as a fractal, the first thing it does do for survival is reproduce itself for the hologram. So, in looking at the big picture here, we understand the cycles of time. Now, we also understand that this isn't taught at school. When you take 3 steps, you would not survive without 3 dimensions of time. Your last step's your past, the one you're in now is your present, and the next one you take is going to be your future. If you didn't have 3 dimensions of time, you'd be actually frozen in time. That's interesting, because we go back and we have a look at people where those dimensions are frozen in time, and they can be frozen for a million years. But one day they can be activated, and all of a sudden it overrides in present day, and it will continue the journey of what took place a million years ago. It's never been cleared, or 1,000 years ago. It's never been cleared. And all of a sudden there's trauma on the person not knowing why, because that dimension has never been cleared. And until we loop time and we clear the dimension. So in doing that, understanding that, I had an interesting case with a woman that took me to a whole new level of this. And she came to see me, she flew in to see me, and she said, I think I've been abducted. So I said, okay, what happened? Well, I was driving home at night, and all of a sudden, I came to a set of lights, big Sammy bearing down on me, that's all I remember. And I got home at 3:15 in the morning, my husband's pacing back and forwards, he's ropeable because I was due home at 11 o'clock and there's 4 hours of missing time. The only explanation I have is I must have been abducted. Okay, I've gone to the table. The spirit instantly took her back into deja vu, which is the last cycle, the big cycle of time, where everything's happened before. And at the same time, the last cycle of time, she went through the lights, bang, and the semi hit her. It took 4 hours for her to die. This time round, as it repeats itself, because there's nothing new under the sun, she got the set of lights, drove through, looks up, instant recall. The moment she had instant recall and she let go, instantly time looped itself and put her outside time 4 hours later, new time track. Now I looked at that and said, wow, this is interesting. You see, I've always been trying to explain the fact that I should be dead at least 4 times. And one of those times I was 18, typical teenager, drunk as a skunk, and I'm going surfing at 9 o'clock at night. I'm going down for the third time, and I remember just letting go. Next minute, a hand reaches into the water. A guy on the surfboard at 9 o'clock at night in the pitch black pulls me out of the drink. That was the first time. Second time, the car is squashed against a telegraph pole. Where I was sitting was totally squashed. I'm 100 yards down the road walking back to the car. The third time on a motorcycle, I'm broadsiding down the road, and I'm about to go into a Volkswagen. And I can remember as clear as day saying, oh, well, here come a couple of broken legs, because I knew there was no way out of this, and the speed I was going straight under him. And the moment I accepted it, something went zap and put me in front of the car. Impossible to do. And I realised the moment you accept something, time will loop itself and put you outside time. I look at that with clients when I go back in time, and I change the past and the present, I loop time on that dimension and give them a new time track outside time. What was in that dimension of time no longer is. It no longer affects them. It creates a new dimension of time. Now, since then, I've spoken to hundreds of people, and you're going to have hundreds of people out there, excuse me, you're going to have hundreds of people out there with the same thing taking place. And with hundreds of people out there, what's going to take place is that the people have had similar experiences where they should be dead, but something instantly has taken place. At times, loop itself has actually put them outside time. Now, just out there, you're going to have so many people out there all of a sudden recognise situations of similarity. But the key here is the moment time loops itself, the moment you acknowledge it, the moment you recognise it, acknowledge it, time instantly loops itself and puts a new time track where that no longer affects you. Now, let's go to the bigger picture. As we're moving through time and space, like a spiral on a spring, let's just say, there's always going to be a past, there's always going to be a present, but there's going to be a point in time and space where that conjunction is going to meet. And that conjunction is August this year. Now, my thing was it's going to be between the 2nd of August and the 19th of August, but I believe it'll be the 14th. So as I'm looking at this and saying, okay, well, this will possibly be the 14th of August, so if it's the 14th of August, what's going to happen on the 14th of August? And I got an email in this week, and it's very interesting because I didn't know this. The person says, I've been looking into things, and the date 14/8, and in the Bible it says Zechariah 14:8, and it will come to pass on that day that living waters will go out from Jerusalem, blah blah blah, and Jehovah will rule the land, blah blah blah, which brings me to where it says, and where shall we go when you're gone? Follow the man with the water pitcher, the age of Aquarius, the age of Pisces, and this will be the new dimension of time, I believe. But I didn't know it was mentioned in there under 14:8, 14th of the 8th, under Zechariah. Plus a bit more stuff it talks about there. So it looks like there's a change takes place on that date, which is recorded through time. Because remember, to me, you know, I don't like religion at all because of things I've seen it do to my own culture. But I do look at this Bible as being a record of time and of future events. Because it's all happened before. There's nothing new under the sun. So that's the date of the conjunction.
So you're saying this conjunction has occurred in various forms before in time?
Oh, yes. Remember, there always has to be a past, present and a future. And it's like a spiral. It's like a spring. Let's say the spring. Again, a little static there. You can cut the static. It's like the spring. You cut that static. You got static there from your speaker again. Hello?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was so listening to what you're saying. I can't speak. There's a lot of static coming back on me from it. That's all.
There we go. You're good now, Steve.
What's going to take place is that, and I remember, I look at life, and the whole reason I call it holographic kinetics is because we're a fractal of a hologram in ourselves that are reproducing themselves just as a fractal of a hologram does. We are the hologram. But what takes place is when we loop time and space and time loops itself, it actually puts you outside time, and what was inside time is no more. It doesn't affect you anymore. 2 days later, people don't even remember what happened. They don't remember the issue sometimes. So I'm looking at this, and it's like the moment you accept something, time will loop itself, put you outside time where the accident took place. It's actually changed the physical world to reality. Now, the next level of it is that Deja vu is what will happen before. We now live in the now, and the future cycle of time we're coming into. So there's a past, there's a present, and a future. The moment we hit the conjunction of the future cycle, the present will become the past. The past and present, which is up to the future, will be the new future, and we head into another new future for the new cycle of time. Always 3 dimensions. But those that are ready when time will loop itself will be outside time. Those that aren't will still be inside time. I believe there'll be conjunction will take place, and there'll be 2 dimensions of time.
So what does that mean for humanity, sort of on the individual level and the collective level even? What do you sort of see happening there?
Well, okay. I look at the same as when I'm with a client. The moment we clear something from the client, sometimes instantly that issue is just not there. It's gone. It no longer affects them. And 2 days later, they look back and they say, well, what happened to Seth? And they can't even remember what happened because it's not there. So when the time the conjunction takes place, I believe with the same thing. You won't even remember what has or was, for you'll just be in that new conjunction. And where you're meant to be is where you be.
Which is why we don't remember this happening over and over again.
That's correct.
So what led you to the understanding that the conjunction that you're talking about is likely to take place around that sort of early to mid-August time frame?
It's a mathematical formula, and I look at some of the stuff that Einstein himself, a certain date Einstein used that had to be very important for an experiment they carried out with. And in 2003, in August, I said to my student for 6 months before that date, something major is going to take place around the world. Watch. And this was 6 months I was saying this. And smack on, 12, 13, 14, around that era, again, what took place? Do you remember all the big blackouts through Europe? Remember?
No.
Oh, they had massive blackouts throughout Europe. You know, Italy,
right.
France, right through Europe, there's massive blackouts right through that period of time. And that's when what they did, they turned on the harp and they needed to divert millions of megawatts of electricity.
Right.
And that was the date I believe they put a thought form in the ionosphere to affect every living thing on the earth. Now to understand that is what takes place is that, why that date? Because that date was the earth's lowest point to aspire with them. If you want to hit something, hit it when it's down. And that was the point when the earth was at its lowest point as an entity itself, the spirit itself. So therefore, remember, everything's a hologram. And if you change the fractal of a hologram, it'll change the hologram. And remember, thought is energy, which can be projected into the fractal. And we're all part of that fractal of this earth. So it gets very complex when we start getting into the multi-dimensions of what we're dealing with here. But there's things that I'm aware of and what we can do. I mean, we've done research that will blow your mind. You know, some of the equipment we've used over the years. You know, we've surrogate spirit in, measured them on machines, surrogate them into me, then on machines beforehand, mind measurement, body measurement, surrogate them into me, my body's riddled with cancer, surrogate them back to themselves, gone back in the machine again, I'm back to normal again. Showing that we can measure what's in another person, we surrogate the spirit through time and space, in on machines. They register. I've got a photo of a Killian photograph here of a person before and after an event. Before the event, you see massive holes in the aura. 3 big white dots in there, and they're spirits. And this woman, she's riddled with pain, been around the world. And the doctors around the world, they say to her, you've got all the signs of syphilis, but you don't have syphilis. And give her painkillers. So she comes to see me, put her on the table. I had a Killian photographer there, so he took the photo first off before the case. Put it on the table, went back to 6 years old. What happened? Moved into a new house. What happened? Belonged to my uncle. What happened? He shot his 4-year-old daughter, shot his 17-year-old son, and committed suicide, and we inherited the house. Okay. We said, well, change of energy, just check this out. Sure enough, what have I got? 3 spirits in her. And those 3 balls of light were the 3 spirits in a field. So I brought the boy up first, he was having a shower, Dad walked in a shotgun, he didn't want to die, so she moved into her body. Then I brought the little girl up, she cried her heart out, my daddy shot me, why did he shoot me? Because remember, the spirit's stuck in the last trauma of that moment of time. We unfolded time and space and dealt with it. I brought the old man through, what's the story? An affair behind the wife's back and he caught syphilis. He would have gone through the whole family back in that time, so he thought he'd terminate the kids and himself while the wife sat shopping, which he did. So we changed the dimension, and spirit if you could change this for the future, how would you be? I wouldn't have the affair, spend time with my family. So live time, change for the future cycle of time, and released all three spirits. The moment she said, my God, 56 years of pain, gone, totally gone. We took another photo with killing photography. You should see how balanced the energy field is. And right where the third eye is, perfect circle, which is her spirit, full and total control of itself.
Amazing. Wow.
Some of the stuff, I mean, you can measure these things. You can take photos of some of these things, you know. It's there, and yet no one's doing any research. You know, there's millions of dollars going to universities, and yet no one's doing any research in these fields to really make changes. You know?
I don't think the people who are kind of pulling the strings really want that, which I guess is why it ain't happening.
Rephrase that. The beings behind the people pulling the strings don't want that.
Right. You got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And remember one thing, this is our world. They're in another dimension. If they invade our dimension, these beings can be dealt with because this is our dimension, this is our world. You just have to
our game.
That's it. You've got to understand the laws of law and how to apply it. And once you do, you can trap these beings in and you can deal with them. They won't come anywhere near you. Oh, they'll bolt. They'll take the body and bolt too. I mean, I used to do seminars in the early days. I noticed in the early days I do a seminar. And I noticed I look around the room and I'd see 3 or 4 entities in people's features, you see. Or other beings in there. And I'd notice that they'd start to ask all these stupid questions and interfere with the class every time. And I'm saying, what's going on here, Spirit? You know, how come this happens? Anyway, I listened to it and it said, your game, take control. So I said, okay, I will. So I got a friend and I said, okay. I said, lock onto the door over there. I said, another one, lock over there. I said, I'm going to lock them into the room. I'm going to create a new game here. So what I did was I created a total still around the room, and when these things came up, I could see them. They started asking questions before they finished talking, and I want to do. I call it sliding, and in between talking, I'd slide, and sliding, I'm actually reading these things. I've spotted you and reading them right, and the next minute, really interesting. What happens? They panic in the body, and they try to get the body out of the room. Some of the body will pass out on the floor. It's really fascinating what happens. The moment these beings get spotted, they go into panic mode.
Mm-hmm. Crazy.
Yeah. The world's not what we think it is. Definitely not what we think it is.
Totally agree. You mentioned something before when you're talking about the conjunction about HAARP being activated in 2003, which kind of brings me to another question that I had that relates to some stuff that's been happening elsewhere on the internet recently, but basically just wanting to know if you've got any knowledge of the existence of mind control type technologies that might be being used to kind of psychically attack people or, to influence or manipulate them somehow, either individually or even, groups of people. Do you know anything about any of that?
Yeah, sure. We'll stop and have a look. When you went to Iraq, what was the first thing we used in Iraq? Remember all the soldiers, Iraqi soldiers coming out of the tunnels, coming out of the bunkers. The first thing they did was set microwave weapons across Iraq and used microwave weapons to manipulate the minds of the Iraqis. Well, hang on. Where in the hell did they experiment with those to find out that worked? Think about it.
Back at home.
Yeah, of course.
The States.
Of course. And of course, people in those areas, today they're using microwave weapons, they're using light frequency weapons, and they're using sound devices to manipulate the thought process of man. Mm-hmm. So there's many different ways they're using that. But again, my thing is, once you spirit, look, whatever's projected out there, I don't care whether it's the chemtrails or not. I mean, usually chemtrails land on your skin. And what happens is, because you don't tell your spirit otherwise, it takes it on. My thing is, spirit, if anything lands on my skin, if it's not mine, don't take it on.
That was going to be my next question is, is there anything that you know of that we can do to kind of protect ourselves, or defend ourselves from these kinds of things? You basically just explained it, so.
Yeah, well, the most powerful thing to understand is that our spirit is really very powerful. And we haven't been listening to it. We've been trying to warn us over certain things. We haven't been communicating to it. We've been giving power outside ourselves. The moment we come back into power as a spirit, we become very powerful beings, and we do not have to take on projections of others. We don't have to take on frequencies of others.
Sure.
So this is actually occurring, we have our microwave technology and electromagnetic technology to manipulate other people. the thoughts of other people, but these are people that are already most likely managed by something else anyway. So,
well, what happens is they can actually program the soul.
sure.
Once the soul's programmed, it's going to react on the program.
Yeah, it's like a computer. You're just responding to commands then.
Well, it's the same. Hang on. It's the same as in your cells that the program you take on is your thought forms that are enacted every day in you that you haven't cleared. There's no difference.
It all comes back to clearing. Just clearing.
It
All
all comes back at point zero. Point zero. At point zero, you don't take on. At point zero, you observe the games for what they truly are games. And remember, you don't have to be in someone else's reality. So therefore you can create your own reality outside of that reality. That's the beauty of this universe. You don't have to be in someone else's reality. So the moment you create another reality and you're in that reality, it's like a lot of time you get what's known as the alters. But with alters, what I've found with a lot of the alters is, example, just say as a young child, you got very violent parents. But of course the thing is you had to come back to experience that because you possibly were very violent in the past. So the moment you can accept what you did back in time and change it, that dimension will be dealt with. But meanwhile, what takes place is a lot of times a little child coming through and parents yelling and screaming and carrying on, they don't like that reality, so they create an altered reality. Now in that altered reality, they can bring their little friends in. In that altered reality, they can create other things. But as they don't want to be in this reality, that becomes an invitation for something else to come into this reality and take over the vehicle in this reality. Now what takes place is you've got two realities. They keep dropping out of this reality into an altered reality, where it can be programmed by their thoughts, by their actions, and everything else in these other realities, their safe zone, until we go back to find out why they create that altered reality. And we change the altered reality and give them back control of their real reality, which can be done. It's the same as sometimes you get people out there barking like a dog and plucking like a chicken, Tourette's syndrome. You know, I'll give you an example here. Again, you know, I've got a little boy. He's 11 years old. Every morning he goes and touches certain trees on the property and certain rocks. You know, every night he's doing it. In the car he's sniffing the air. The parents take him to the doctor. The doctor says he needs to see a psychiatrist. Psychiatrist says we need to monitor him, lock him up and medicate him so we can find out what's going on. The parents said, no way. They brought him up to me. I put the little boy on the table. He's through in the cause effect 8 years old. Thank you. What's happening? I'm on the mountain top with my dad. Thank you. And what's happening? We're doing a ritual. Thank you. And what sort of ritual? I'm calling in my spirit totem. Thank you. And what's your spirit totem? Spirit of kangaroo. Thank you. Well, when's the kangaroo come out? Morning and evenings. So I asked his spirit, do I have a spirit of kangaroo in the body? He said, yes. Thank you. Step aside. Spirit of kangaroo surface service now. Why'd you invade the body? And speaking out, the little boy, it says, he called me in. Thank you. I folded time and space. I released the spirit of the kangaroo. Instantly, the compulsive disorder disappeared.
And this is where people have got to be really, really aware of the kind of agreements that they're entering into, and what they're inviting in. And I think some of it's done unconsciously with a lot of people. You know, they just don't realise what they're doing when they're doing it.
And this is it. And then they get all the confusion in their head because you've got a whole group of, well, you haven't got one or two, you've got a little minibus in there with all fight decisions and take over driving the vehicle.
Right.
Yeah, there has to be, it seems to me, a some sort of motivational factor to get people out of their, because I've noticed when, talking about work like this and similar clearing, means of clearing, people get very much into denial and angry and reactive, and there has to be a central motivator. It's almost like people are asking now for something they don't really want. I want what I don't want. Because then we go back to that self-responsibility thing. It's everybody else has to change but me. But that's where our power is change on the inside.
Yeah, well, I think a lot of people are looking for answers. And in looking for the answers, they're seeking outside themselves for the answer. And they're failing to realise that the answer is within. It's not outside of you. It's within. And because they're going outside themselves, they're just inviting other things in now, so they're going to get worse instead of getting better.
That is a lot of inner work, and it was always intriguing to me because you keep addressing spirit. Spirit, take me to this time when this occurred.
Of course.
And this is how I've cleared a lot of my programs, is what I mentioned earlier about feeling guilty for sitting down. I was making an agreement. I feel guilty for sitting down and enjoying myself when I really should have been doing something productive, and that was actually going back to my childhood where you just weren't supposed to do that. Every day was supposed to be productive, and there's no goofing off, and there's no... And there was a program that I actually had my mother in my head. My mother was in my head. So,
and let me ask a question. What age in your childhood was
it? It started between like 4 and 5, like when I was old enough to do things. You know.
I will guarantee.
But I also before that
it came through time. I guarantee that was set up in the past.
Yeah, it was even listening to this when it wasn't being directed to me. I was hearing it being directed at my brothers and sisters. You know.
Yeah, but that was only the trigger to trigger off.
That was
trigger off the sleeper.
Yeah, and then going back further. But
I think how powerful some of these programs are.
They are very powerful.
Well, this is one of the most fascinating ones I thought, because I'm dealing with lots of women at times, and the program is I'm not good enough. So I've got a client one day, and we're finding, okay, Spirit, I want to go back. I want to go back through time and space. I want to go back no matter how far back, the very first time that I'm not good enough was ever set up. How do you go there now? What's happening? I'm lined up with all the other virgins. Thank you. And what's happening? The high priest is coming along. Thank you. And what's happening? He's picking out the virgins to be sacrificed. Continue. What happened? Next thing, she breaks down crying her eyes out. I wasn't chosen. I'm not good enough. That's how powerful programs were.
That is a very powerful program that works in women, and and I've seen those things before, which is ludicrous. It's like, well, but and there's other ones that are similar to it too.
Yeah, but what I'm saying there on that is
the
program back in time is I'm not good enough to be sacrificed to the gods.
I know,
therefore, I'm not good enough. And the program was honour to be sacrificed.
Well, look at original sin. In Christianity, it's that everybody in the whole world is just sucks because of women. We just ruined it all for them. And how long has this been playing in our head?
We won't blame you for that.
Nobody ever said, well, Adam, you dumbass, just because she handed you the apple didn't mean you had to take it. Nobody ever said anything. Like, it's always women, women. So, yeah, it's incredible. And those are like collective programs running.
That's another story to go into the beginning of time, what really took place and what's been taking place for thousands of years. That's a whole other ball game now, and how religion was structured and how these beings and how the word Adam came about. Really got to understand, again, time and what took place way back in time. Some of the old Sumerian texts talk of those old records of time and what took place. And man, even today, the fact is today, all around the world, they're finding giants. I've got a friend who's been doing research with a group over in Egypt with the pyramids. They've found a new pyramid and they've been into it. And they sent me a photo. I've got a petrified finger of one of the giants. 18 inches long, the finger. Petrified, mummified in one of the tombs. So the giants were here a long time ago. And they were the first lot, the giants, the Nephilim that were here. But then they needed species that could mine the sunk rock at the end of the cycle. When they went back to where they came from, then what took place, they needed new species, want to adapt to this way of life. So genetic engineering took place. And the dummy at that time, he couldn't think for himself. You got the Sasquatch, Yowie, Bonamassa man, to get him, Yeti, the Gobi man. As the Aboriginal say to you, never catch a Yowie, mate. He'd eat 1 minute and gone the next, because he moved between dimensions. It wasn't until molecular mortal man was created, and the first man was the Adama. Adam was an Adama. Go and have a look in the Bible. He lived for 930 years. Noah lived for 950. They were Adamas. But the genes continued through time. Abraham, 176 years. You see, you've really got to understand the big picture of our world and go through look at all the skeletons of giants they're finding nowadays around the world from when the Nephilim were here originally. You've got to look at the big picture and go through time. Then look how religion was set up. You know, you can look at the temples. And the temples, why were the gargoyles and winged serpents over the temples in Europe? They're always over the entrance because the entrance represented entrancement. And they would entrance you through the entrance and down to be altered at the altar. The altar represents altar. And they would alter you. In other words, they take over and you're no longer you. And this again is part of the mathematical formula. That's how the universe works with people.
Entrancement and entrapment.
Yeah. That's, you know, and you got to look at all religion, how religion was formed originally, where it was formed, and the beings that came through there. And you'll start to understand what's really going on in our world today is not what we think. I mean, if you remind me later, I'll send you a video. I'll send you a video that'll be an eye-opener to you.
That'd be good.
There's only a couple of things I've got. I mean, I'm getting research. I've got students all around the world. I mean, stuff's in all the time. You know, I mean, just the other day, we've got a pyramid here in Australia. Not a pyramid.
We do?
We had a few pyramids here in Australia, yeah. But we've got an Egyptian hieroglyphics down at Woy Woy. And I've been down there 4 or 5 times to it. And it's 2 big walls, you know, about 15, 20 foot high with capstones on them. And it's all Egyptian hieroglyphics. But they've been researched.
No, Steve, I sent you an email about that probably 4 months or so ago. I never got a response, so I just assumed that you weren't interested in it.
Oh, but, no, I've been there a few times. But have you seen the latest when they went down underneath it? And the photos they've taken underneath?
I saw some video footage of people that were down there, and it was sort of scrolling along, showing all the different hieroglyphics, and they were saying that the Egyptians had been here sort of 20-odd thousand years ago, and that they'd taken away a lot of the knowledge and wisdom of the original, you know, Aboriginal people from Australia with them back to Egypt. And there's a story that went with the hieroglyphics that there were 2 princes, I believe, Egyptian princes, that came over here, and one of them got sick and had to stay, and the other one left and took back a lot of the knowledge, the people here at the time.
Wow, I mean, this is not something you find in mainstream. That is amazing. You just don't find that in mainstream anything. I mean,
well,
no.
A couple of months ago, I was down there too, a couple of students down there, and what we found a slab that had been moved, and under the slab was a perfect entrance down under it. And what happened, they've just been down recently underneath it, and they've filmed underneath it. And it's like a tunnel shaft going underneath it. And they just found this big ball of melted metal, but in the middle of it is melted amongst it is this about 3-inch crystal.
Right.
They believe whatever's come through was metal and it's melted, and this is part of the science. And there's a lot more stuff they've found underneath there as well. There's other areas there they've found stuff in, and you know, they're doing a lot more research in that area at present.
I bet, you know, is the government getting involved in that? Like generally when, you know, those sort of things are found, you know, it doesn't take long for them to come in and start taking over and
they'll put barriers up, so you can't drive down there anymore. You've got to walk about 1 kilometre or so into the bush to find it. And I was there a couple of years ago, and they had real estate signs all the way along there. You know, they're selling the properties, dividing up, selling the properties there. But the signs have gone now, so whether they've sold them or whether they're going to still or not, I don't know. But
do you have any idea what that molten ball of metal and the internal crystal, what that might have been for?
Well, what they're finding at present is they believe that it was a crash site for a UFO, and this was part of it as it's come through and burned up and melted. But the crystal was part of its, you know, mechanism. And the crystals, it's virtually a solid crystal surrounded by, sticking out. I'll send it to you. I'll send a photo of it through to you.
Yeah, that'd be great if you could send that. I'd love to see that. It's fascinating. So they're kind of getting the picture that this craft or whatever has crash landed, and they built a sort of a temple around it, basically.
Yeah, and this is like melted steel with a crystal smack in the middle of it. The steel's all melted around it. Or the metal's melted around it. You know, I mean, it's been underground for hundreds of years, you know, thousands of years. But,
sure.
Yeah, what happened to the guy, they brought a guy up in the States with one of the most latest advanced metal detectors. And that's how they found it.
Dan, if you look at how many people are looking for a UFO to come and save them. and worship.
That's an old program. That's an old program.
Very old program. Yeah, something is coming back. Jesus, something is coming back to save you, or something out there needs to be worshipped.
Can you turn down your mic again for me, sec? Turn the mic off, sec. Thanks. I'll tell you what happened. With people that have had abductions, I would go back to the cause and effect. Now, this is a number of cases. And what took place is that every 3,600 Earth years, we go through a change. Now, two cycles back, I should say. 2 cycles back, where these beings come back here to visit our Earth again, what happened is, one of the girls, she's screaming hysterically. And we're dealing with it and finding where it came from. And abductions are online. We go back to cause and effect. At the end of each cycle, mass UFOs, some of them, hundreds of miles across, came down here to the Earth and said the Earth is going through turmoil. We're here to take you off planet. So all those aboard the craft, entered the craft. Then what they said was, you've entered their game, you see. We'll let you come down and take another human body to allow us to monitor you. There's your agreement. They are the same people I found that have been monitored through time by these beings. Because they made an agreement back in... You see, one of the things is, this universe is based on the laws of law. And the first law is the law of intent. Then it's the integration between you and your spirit. And then from that comes the law of agreement and then the spoken word. The moment you make an agreement, it's valid through time and space for eternity. But nothing can come through and enter you without an agreement. So they formed all these agreements. When you pray, when you call things in, these are all agreements you're making. And the first is...
Worship something.
Yep, they're agreements. And so all these people that are waiting for the beings to come back, they're the same people that last time, went off and were trapped in the game. And of course they get trapped in the game again next time,
And now they're repeating the cycle.
Yep.
They're waiting for their long-lost space buddies to come and scoop them up and take them somewhere, beautiful.
Yeah. I call it pork on the fork.
Yeah. Don't get Shelley started on this. I'm surprised she's not piped up yet, because this is one of her sort of pet hates.
You have to restrain me with that one. I get a little impassioned with it.
You're being very restrained right now.
Well, I also don't want my microphone raising pain in there either. So,
but and this is important. We've got to take consideration. Out of the hundreds, and I reckon it'd be hundreds of thousands of people, 40 odd years, probably 100,000 people I've worked on, I have found that we have many beings here from other dimensions in human bodies. Many different species from around the galaxy.
Mm-hmm. I've found that to be true as well. Not everything that appears to be in human form is actually human as we know humans to be. We just think that humans are just this cookie. We have this central form, which is actually optimal to live in this density. Our hands but not everything that is inside underneath our skin is human as we've always thought that humans are to be.
It's only the physical vehicle that is, the body itself as a human is a physical vehicle. Genetically, the vehicle through time is the vehicle. But what enters the vehicle at the moment of conception, the spirit comes in, that's the spark of life. Scientists, they will tell you that before the thought gets to the brain, it gets to the heart. Yes, it does, because it first comes through spirit, which is in the heart. And this is why when people have heart transplants, they get a change of personality, because they actually put another heart in. I've had people with heart transplants, and I call up the spirit that belongs to the heart, and he's talking out of the body or crying out of the body, because he's leaving his wife and kids behind. We deal with that and change it for the future. The spark of life is linked to who comes in the vehicle. Now, what happens is, a spirit can come into the vehicle, but something else can also come in with that spirit. If they've got born rights, which a lot of these beings have because agreements have been made, then those beings can enter under the born rights. But to take over the vehicle, they have to traumatise the spirit. Then they get to take over that vehicle. Now they're running the vehicle. You see, I've found out of the people working over the years, there are certain beings who have certain traits. I've had half alien, half human. I've had hybrids on the table. It's still being monitored by these beings. There's a whole range of species and there's certain traits in certain species I find. And it takes me to whole new areas today where Okay, here, listen to this one. Now, this one's going to blow your mind. As I said, look, we've brought up hundreds of different types of animal spirits in people, and we've cleared them. So I get one of my students one day comes to me and says, boy, I had an interesting case the other day. And I said, what? Well, you know how you taught us how to find animal spirits in people? Well, this guy's at sea, went back to 3 years old. He's on a boat at sea with his dad. He started to come up the ladder in a rough seas, and Dad said, get back down there. He knocks him down. He falls on the floor, hits his head, and he's crying, and there's a crab dying on the floor. So he looks at that, and, he said, anyway, he tested, and the spirit of the crab entered him. He said, so we brought the spirit of crab up, we changed time, and released it. He said 2 weeks later, he rang and asked if he'd come out and work on his son. So the student went out to work on his son. He walked in. He said, I never fell over backwards. He said his son come out and he says he doesn't have any toes. He's just got these fat flippers as feet and he doesn't have any fingers, just 2 nippers. How far does morphine go through the vehicle?
Wow.
And that takes me looking at different types of species of similarity and saying, well, are we doing another species that's communicating some of these beings where we see similar features in these beings? None of this has been researched. None of this. And we really should be understanding anything at all that creates a mental illness or a problem in a person. We should be looking at the cause of where it's really coming from to understand the facets of all the dimensions.
That would certainly abate a lot of the conflict in the world right now if we all stop going, well, we're all humans, we should just get along and start identifying, that perhaps we're not all humans and take it from there. But wow, it's a tremendous self-exploration that's going to be initiated, and it all has to be done on the individual level, like the one person.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, as I said, I'm still amazed in some of the research we're doing. We're always looking for new things, and we have found that the interesting thing about spirit is it's actually linked to internal hyperspace. It's omnipresent, it's omnipotent, it's omniscient. It can be everywhere at the same time instantly. No matter how far out in time and space you are, you can be a million miles. I mean, look, this could be used for space travel. You can be a million miles away, and we can bring your spirit on the table and happen to talk you out of the table if there's something wrong with you, rectify it, and send you back again. Distance is only a physical world of reality, of our linear world in distance. But when it's spirit and hyperspace, where are we looking today and saying, well, hang on, if we can change the fractal of the hologram, and man's a hologram, then we move the fractal of the hologram of man and change the fractal of the next hologram, and we keep going up the fractals of the holograms, we can actually enter way back through time. And some of the research we're doing and looking at today is that we can reach back to the original creation of man.
You mentioned yesterday in a chat that I had with you a little bit about a project that you're sort of considering there. Is that something you feel you can talk about here, or?
Which one was that? We've got a number of programs.
Well, the one that you were kind of just alluding to there about going all the way back to the original creation of man and trying to figure out exactly what happened there.
Yeah, well, I mean, if these beings, we're made in the likeness of God, so what's it tell me? And if you go back to Sumerian texts and study it, you'll find that, the DNA of the beings that came here, actually, they use their own DNA. Well, if they use their DNA, and we're part of that DNA in the likeness of the gods, then that tells me, as a fractal of the hologram, I can access the fractal of the hologram to the hologram, but look at the fractal, look, that hologram's been a fractal of another hologram, that fractal of another hologram, a fractal of another hologram, and I can actually move through time and space back to the original beings that we're linked to.
Mm-hmm.
And we can make change on their dimension. Look, it's endless. Some of the stuff we're doing is endless. It really is. We're looking at, I'm looking at the mathematics, the maths and geometry of how it all works, and I understand that a lot of this is actually linked to the Fibonacci mathematics. The past, the present sets up the future. I'm looking at the 3 cycles of time, which is, again, it's mentioned through time, and the keys are there in our own Bible, that people don't even see the keys are there. And it represents the fact that if we in the present change the past, then we must change the future. It's got to happen. So I'm looking at this and saying, well, Spirit, if this is the case, then can we accelerate rehabilitation of brain injuries in car accidents? I'm looking at the mass and geometry and thinking, well, if I surrogate someone into the body and I change the past and present before the future, I've changed the fractal of the hologram, which will now tell the new hologram there's nothing wrong with the body. Because we put it back to perfection. Within 2 weeks, I've got a chap who I worked on 7 years ago, and he had a head-on collision in a car. He got scalped, he's got his ear ripped off, brain injuries, and trauma for months in hospital. And he came on to do the course. So I thought, okay, thank you, Spirit. Got him on the table, through the course, and the body's jerking and jolting all over, which was trauma in all the cells. So he changed all the trauma in the cells, took it all out. By the time he was finished, his body's relaxed. He was still speaking a little bit slowly. So what we did then was, 6 weeks later, came back and did the course again. So great. So this time we focus on the brain injury part. And by the time we finished the course, within the week, he's not speaking slowly anymore. He's walking normal. And we found massive change we made in the hologram of time in those 2 weeks period, showing that we can accelerate rehabilitation for the future. We've been the spirit of people have had, heart transplants through, and we can get the two spirits to communicate to change the personalities. We find liver and kidney. The spirit says, it's not my stuff, so it goes into rejection of it because it's not its program. That's quite clear, the program doesn't belong to it. There's so many areas, I've got a little girl here. This is one of the favourite ones. I really love this one here. I'm in New Zealand, and the mother brings me her daughter. She's up on her tippy toes, and a little twisted hands a little bit in, and she's never eaten, she's never spoken. She's got tubes sticking out of her stomach, and they feed her through tubes. Mother says, can you help me? I have no idea, but nothing ventured, nothing gained. So, hop on the table. So I put the mother on the table, and I surrogate the spirit of the little girl into the mother. I then do some work on the little girl through the mother. I put the spirit back in and send them off and away. 2 days later, she rang me and she said, look, the special school has noticed changes. I've noticed changes. The osteopath's noticed changes. Can I get another session before you leave New Zealand? So I said, bring in the father. So the father came in. I put him on the table. I surrogated the little girl into the father. And the first thing I said to the spirit, I want to know why the soul of the vehicle had the throat chest problems down through time. It went back to the great-great-grandfather of tuberculosis. I cleared the dimension, changed the dimension of time for the future. Now, spirit, I want to know, why did you have to come to a vehicle that couldn't communicate? 20-year-old female. Thank you. What's happened? I've just stabbed my grandfather in the throat. Thank you. What for? Because he raped me, sexually abused me. There's only way I can stop it. Thank you. That tells me reciprocal exchange of energy. That tells me about the spirit of the grandfather, and you can't talk, he's been stabbed in the throat. I didn't fold time and space, send him back in time, change the past and present for the future. Send her back and change the past and present for the future. Then I put her spirit back into herself. 2 days later, she's eating and speaking for the first time. I went back about 6 months ago, and they brought the little girl to me. She's no longer up on tippy toes. She's down on a fat fleet now. She's doing really good. She's eating everything, but she has trouble chewing. So I surrogated the mother. It went back to another lifetime where she was a slave, hit on the side of the head with a hunk of wood, and the jaw got broken, and the trauma was still in the jaw. So I took that out. She'll be right now. Next time we're back in New Zealand, I'll bring her to me again. I'll check her out and see how she's going.
That's just amazing. It's a real shame that mainstream's just not as accepting of this kind of thing, the work that you're doing, as they possibly could be, if they just really have a look at it.
Oh, look, to me, let me in with a team. You have a psychiatrist or a psychologist that purely simply is neutral. In other words, I don't want any intent with them coming to the wrong angle, because a lot of these guys have got their own game running and
their own agendas.
Yeah. To look at this for what it truly is, or somebody wants to really do some proper research, or university wants to do some proper research in the outcome of what we're doing, and I'll tell you now, will blow their mind. Mm-hmm. Blow their mind with stuff. They won't be able to comprehend what we're doing because it's not in the square box. It's not in their little box of tricks. It's not in their little box of analysing. You can't analyse spirit. And the simplicity when people say, you can't see it doesn't exist. Well, I'll tell you now, hand me a thought. You can't, because it doesn't exist. It's invisible. It's happy.
What is when people start digging into this, they're gonna start finding the same things within themselves. And I got interested in this sort of thing years back. I was going to the doctor every November. In the fall, I was going to the doctor because I had a sinus infection, and it was the doctor who noticed. He goes, this is kind of funny. He goes, every year you get a sinus infection on November 12th. And I said, that's psychosomatic then. The law of averages just say that, what's the law of averages going to say? I mean, I automatically just get a sinus infection every November 12th. Well, I started looking into that, the whole psychosomatic thing, and when I was a child, that's when I got admitted to the hospital. Was on a November 12th. And I remembered this. Some part of me remembered this, and an illness developed every November 12th. It was bizarre.
The cycle was still running.
Yeah,
the cycle was still at that time. Yep.
So, but I think that when people become a little bit more self-aware and aware of the patterns or the symptoms occurring in their lives or patterns, and I always look for patterns that start to develop in my life. It's like always being vigilant. It's like, is this happened once? Okay, well, it's happening twice, 3 or 4 times now. Let's take a look at what's running here. I think if more people got into this, you're going to find some of these amazing things within themselves. I mean that very loosely. It's very kind of disempowering, but it's also very kind of incredible too. And I do think that we do have, our governments, they take it, it's very easy to take advantage of disempowered people and frighten people and people that don't have a sense of self-value, or people who, whatever program happens to be running, we're very easily taken over and even through just perception, how those people are more powerful than me. Well, who decided that? You did.
It's like you said earlier, Shelley, too, clearing. That's where the key is, I believe, for everyone. If we can start looking at this stuff, taking personal responsibility for it and clearing the stuff away, it's really going to open us up to just a whole new modus of self-empowerment, and clarity.
Let me just take you to something else to show you how the laws of law is actually working. So remember, law in the universe, L-O-R-E, the laws of law, it covers all dimensions, and there are laws that cover these dimensions. Now, the universe itself wants you cleared. Old people before they die. Look how many old people before they die revert back in time to issues 5 years old, 7 years old, 8 years old, that they never cleared. This is part of the universal law saying, deal with your stuff now so you don't have to come back. Because if you don't deal with it now, you're going to bring it back in the future cycles of time.
Exactly.
You're stuck in time. All the old people's homes need people clearing them before they go. The children's hospitals need clearing of the kids that are coming through trauma of the past and setting up those traumas not being dealt with. The prison system have got repeat offenders that are stuck in time. Mental health, I've been in mental health wards called in the high security prisons, people with voices in the head. I go in and bring the spirits and things are up there and take them out, and no more voice. They're now being released, not mentally insane anymore. You've got to look at all these areas and say, hey, whoa, 80% of the issues out there happening with mental health, prisons and other issues are people stuck in time and repeating patterns. Let's start clearing those. Let's learn how to clear these issues. Let's start to make a change for the future.
And the doctors and specialists and whatnot that are out there in mainstream, all they're doing is treating the symptoms with medications, and it doesn't work. What
That's
you're doing,
program.
on the other hand.
Treating, not curing. It's not treatment. You don't cure anything. You just keep treating it. You put a Band-Aid on. You cut your arm off, put a Band-Aid on. Well, it doesn't cure it.
The reason they're doing that, though, is because they don't understand where those symptoms are coming from, and that's the key to it, again, and that's what Steve is doing with holographic kinetics. It's just so empowering, is being able to go back and figure out where all this stuff is coming from, deal with it, and move on.
Well, I really do have this problem with some of the things I've seen with mental health. I've been called in to some of the mental health wards where they double the medication, and one young bloke, they double his medication. He's been seen a naturopath. He's on forced medication. He's been seen a naturopath. The naturopath says he's got kidney and liver problems. He's got a new doctor in, and I sat on the tribunal. So I said to the new doctor, she's coming from India, and she's doubled his medication. So I said, excuse me, can you please tell me why I doubled the man's medication? It's violent. I said, I'm going to ask you again, can you please tell me why you doubled this man's medication and who has it been violent to? He refuses his medication. I'm going to ask you again. Who has this man been violent to? He refuses medication. Are you saying because he's refused his medication he's violent? Yes. If I forced you down and forced medication into you, would you struggle? Yes, of course I would have it. Thank you. Now this man, because you just doubled his medication, He already has kidney and liver failure online. If his kidney and liver fails and he dies of failure of the kidney, are you prepared to take responsibility? No, that's not my fault. Well, hang on. His autopsy says died of kidney failure, died of liver failure. It doesn't say died because of side effects of medication, which destroyed his liver and his kidney.
Well, that's what most chemotherapy is. A lot of people don't die of cancer; they die of chemotherapy.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, the point is, if I handed you a gun and you went and shot someone, I'd be an accessory. These guys know the medication they're pushing creates suicidal tendencies. They know the medication creates psychotic episodes. Why are kids at school being put on these medications, knowing the outcome? Look at every shooting you've had in America. Every single one of them. I've got a list here, and I'm not kidding. Thousands of people, including police officers on the list, that have been on, names of medication they're on, names of crime they committed. Thousands of them. Side effects of medication. Well, hang on. You know, the police force itself looks for MOs. Well, if you've got a memorandum here where you've got a similarity of all these people on the same medication, then I start to say, hang on, if all these people on this medication committing suicide, if all these people on this medication committing murder, if all the people on this medication, there's got to be a link between the medication and what's taking place here.
Yep. Not many people see it though. They're just not connecting the dots or seeing that link. Or some are, you know, and there are people talking about that now, but you know, they're few and far between.
Well, the point is that they're going to have to, because it's going to get worse, and while it gets worse, you know, they're totally disempowered. Well, they're captive of the future anyway. I mean, these people have disempowered themselves and they'll be here in the future cycle of time, you know. But the beings, what happen is those that have gone through the medical system and are pushing the medication, they have no idea what they're setting up for those future cycles of time for themselves. You can't escape the cycles of time. If you, by your act, or by your lack of, create pain and suffering to another because of your actions, you will set yourself up in the future cycle of time to experience pain and suffering upon yourself. You cannot escape it.
So it's not just our actions though, it's also our inaction.
That's correct.
Right?
That's correct.
Right. So if you see something and you choose, you make a conscious decision not to act upon that. If you see something wrong and you don't act to change that, you're setting yourself up.
You're violating law, and when you violate law, there are consequences. The universe is, it's like a massive consciousness of everything that's taking place out there, and it knows it. And if it's taking place, it says, whatever role you take, you have to experience. Only then will you understand your creation within my creation. Only then can you have balance. And that's what it's all about.
But instead of creating, we're just reacting or recreating things over and over again. So just creating, you know, where we need to be, we just keep reacting and recreating out the same dramas over and over again, the same stories, the same programs.
That's because we're stuck in time. The moment you deal with that issue, all of a sudden you're not going to keep recreating that drama. Now, the first thing is to be consciously aware of you reacting. The moment you're constantly aware of your reactions and you constantly make a decision not to react, you start to come into point zero. You start to come into balance. You're not going to move through time while you're stuck in time, because you can't be in the pendulum and you can't be moving forward in time at the same time.
That goes back to the observational state that you spoke about earlier as well, where you're not reactive, you're observing.
Observer of the game, yep. And right. Amazingly not that is, you know, you can observe any game, you can enter anywhere and enter any game as an observer, provided you don't interfere in the game. The moment you interfere in the game of another, you enter its game. Now, I'm just going to explain something here about structures, and this is, I think, is very important. I went to do an event. We've got a place called Burke, and it's a pretty wild place, and the kids virtually run the town. It's an Aboriginal community there, and so to do something, it's a festival, and first year of the festival, about 500 kids ran amok, and they broke into everything and stole everything. Next year they set up on the first Monday, 120 kids are run amok. Now they're panicking, oh my God, what's Saturday night going to be like? So I said to the organisers, I want permission from the organisers, from the council, from the elders, and the main body that invited me in. Next day she came in, she said, they've all given you permission to take over. Thank you. I then got a stick and I drew a circle in the sand. I said, that's your Torres field of your festival. I said, when you created this festival, there was no boundaries. Therefore, anything's allowed in and out. Now, the government says, name of entity, ABN of entity. Everything created is an entity, because it's alive. So I got one of my students on the table, and I called the entity through, and I unfolded time and space back to his creation. As I had the rights to take over, I changed his creation, I put a boundary. And in the boundary, I put within the boundary that if any entity is there bringing the kids in the game, they'll be taken out instantly. Saturday night came, we had 70 kids turn up and not one bit of trouble. You could see the campfire in the hills, the entities wouldn't bring the kids in because they get taken out. Structures and boundaries. Everything creation is life. Do you understand? So you yourself, whatever you create, that's your boundary. If you let things into your boundary, you invite them in. If you create a field around you, it's your boundary. Nothing's allowed in. Nothing's allowed to invade it. Because there's consequences. When you invade something, you enter the game of another. Now it's subject to laws of the game. As I said, anything interdimensionally enters my game, they'll get dealt with straight away, good and proper. Because it's entered my game, my reality. This is the key, do you understand? You've got to understand the boundaries of your own game and how it's created. And then the maths and geometry of how it's linked. And that's what we teach. We're actually over in LA teaching from the 26th of this month. It's only a little over a week. I'll be teaching in LA. I mean, if anyone hears this before that time, they want to join in, contact us ASAP. And
how many have you got in that group at the moment, Steve?
I'm not too sure, but I usually only have about 10 people at a time. I teach. That's all. Right. I don't want big groups. It's usually about 10. But this one's been a bit late because I was in Sydney. My computer broke down. By the time I got back here, I had 400 emails.
You're a popular guy.
Got me days to go through the emails. That put me behind time, and I was nearly going to cancel LA, but I thought, oh no, I'll do it anyway. So we run it, but because it's only been the last week or two, I've contacted a lot of the people, and a few of them had to pull out because not enough time, and that's the way the cookie crumbles, as I always say. What's meant to be is meant to be.
Is that the only city that you plan on going to while you're over in the States, or is there
I was going to do
elsewhere?
I was going to do Colorado, but I pulled that out because I'm running so far behind time. Down the track in April, I'll put it on San Francisco, April, and I will try and get back to do Colorado and possibly back on the East Coast again, somewhere on the East Coast, and then up into Canada. In our winter, should be their summer, so temperature should be better for Canada for them. So it'll be around June, July, I think.
I said, while you're talking about upcoming sessions and that kind of thing, do you want to sort of give your website a plug just so people know how to contact you?
Well, they can go www.holographickinetics.net. We now also have a first YouTube we've put out. With me too, that's the first. There'll be a number of them on different subjects we'll be doing. The girls are just putting all that together. And down the track, more questions, or we'll put other things. If there's any particular area people want to know, we'll put that out without giving all the keys, because I mean, as I said, you got to know what you're doing correctly. Too many cowboys out there that take something and think they can run with it, and I've seen
get themselves into trouble.
Yeah,
we've seen a lot of even just very basic healing modalities absolutely destroyed. Any sort of usefulness that they would have has been turned into a program. So, just because of the cowboys. So,
and you got a lot of people out there, they're on drugs that want to be cleared, and yet, 5 minutes later after clear them, I remember I had one girl not so long ago when she came up here, and I must have taken 12 to 15 things out of her. She'd jump all over the place. And all coming through drugs. And when I finished, the first thing she says, wow, I feel great. But that's not going to stop me from smoking. I do it every night. We do it again tonight when I get home. I said, well, I was used to coming to me in the first place. The moment you open the doors, I said, they'll be back. I said, but the big boys will be back this time.
You open yourself up to a whole new level now. Once you take them out, you start up again, next level up.
Yep, good and proper.
Yeah. The other thing is too, you've got a lot of practitioners out there, different modalities now that are, taking things like ayahuasca and allowing, stuff to come in, and then they're sort of treating other people and exposing them to all of that potentially as well.
They inline the clients. A lot of those people inlining the clients. In other words, like a cable system connected to them to their entity.
Yep.
Yeah. Or the cluster. If you've got a big cluster,
everything becomes sort of a battery. Then everybody becomes a little battery station, all interconnected, and
that's right.
A circuit.
That's right. And all three other dimensions. But I mean, you look at nature to understand nature, and I look at spirit originally as in the firmament, in the gases, the liquid, the rock, the plankton, the plant life, the insect life, the animal life, the human life, and next will evolve into something else. But everything's devouring everything else, We're devouring the gases in the air, and we're devouring, insects are devouring the plants, and the animals, small animals are eating the small insects, and then smaller animals eat those animals, and then they eat other things, and we eat cattle, and, hey, it's all energy getting,
transferred, moved around.
Yeah.
It's all natural too. I've got to ask you something, Steve. Actually, it sort of brings to mind a topic that's been raised on a forum that I go to, and that's people getting really upset and uptight about meat eating. Telling us that it's bad for our karma, and because the animals are slaughtered in such inhumane ways that it's going to have an impact on us, and all of those kind of things. What's your take on that?
Okay, if you're the killer of the animal, you kill the animal. Then what takes place is you can take on the spirit of that animal because you've killed it without permission. This is why, example, here in Australia, we have to ship our meat to the Middle East alive because we can't kill it because it's got to go through a process of, bleeding it and releasing the spirit as part of their process, you see. A lot of cultures are aware of this. Now, in the Western world, you go in and, of course, you shoot a ramset bullet in the skull and the animal drops down, and of course, the person's doing that. Any trauma that animal to take on. Now, I had a good example of this, I had an episode where, in hospital there, and there's 4 people in the room, all had the same operation. They've come around, do you want painkiller, want painkiller? No. And one guy screaming all night in pain. And I looked at the guy, and I could see in his features, there's some big shit in here, excuse the expression. So next day I said to him, what do you do for a living? I'm a boner at the abattoirs. And I said, okay.
Right.
So what happens? A lot of spirits in there in pain and suffering, making them live pain and suffering because of what they went through. You get an animal spirit in there, and if your defences are down, or you're drinking alcohol or drugs and it takes over, you can be living the pain and suffering of that particular animal or human. It's the killer of the animal. Now, if the animal's killed with trauma, then the trauma can pass through the meat. And then you eat the meat, you're taking on the trauma of the animal.
What about the sort of mass factory farms now where everything's kind of automated? Most people these days in Australia and other sort of Western cultures now, like they don't have anything to do with the actual slaughtering of the animal itself. They're buying a pre-packaged thing in a nice little plastic,
that animal can
box
have the
or whatever.
slaughter.
And
it's just say your chicken. If that chicken's in a cage and it's been inhumanely treated in the cage, then that animal can have trauma in its cells. And when you take on and you eat that animal, you can actually take on the trauma that was in that animal.
Right.
You see, a good thing here, look back, and I don't know if they still do it nowadays, but I know in World War II, they only ever used to give their men beef, bull. They wouldn't give them lamb because bull makes them big and strong.
Right.
They were aware that what you eat is what you become. So, if you're going to find, you take animals lots of trauma in it, then you're going to eventually take on lots of trauma. You won't know where the trauma came from. We one of the things we do at the course is we go and look for animal spirits. And I was quite surprised at the amount of animal spirits in people because through time, we've all killed some form of animal. And I've had cases in my early days, I didn't understand what we were dealing with. And one case sticks in my mind a lot of a young bloke, young Aboriginal lad up in the Cape. And I haven't been up there for 7 years. I've got to get back up there and try and hunt him down. But in the first days, the guy's eyes are weeping. He's going blind. And his eyes are weeping all the time. They've got him in a mental institution. They've pumped him up with steroids to stop the weeping. I get him on the table, and the first thing comes up, we go to the cause of it, is cheetah. So I beg your pardon. Cheetah. I said, what do you mean cheetah? You know, a big cat, a cheetah. Oh. The spirit of a cheetah? Yeah. What are you doing? I'm walking through the grass. Thank you. What's happening? I've got a grass seed in my eye. What happened? I couldn't get down. What happened? It sprouted. I couldn't feel. I went blind. I died. Okay. I thought, how's this linked to it? 'Cause in the early days I didn't understand how animal spirits could be humans, you see. Mm-hmm. So I go back to the young boy. I said, spirit, what age? He said, 13. Thank you. What happened at 13? I'm smoking dope. What happened? The smoke from the dope irritated my eyes. That triggered off the sleeper.
Right.
But in those days we didn't understand how to remove the animal spirits. Today, no problems. It's been a progressive understanding, different dimensions and how to deal with them all, you see.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That's why I know what's going on with your soldiers over there. Yeah. I know how they can be cleared, but no one's looking at these areas, you see. I mean, talk about programming. You know, I went over to America and I went to the East Coast, and one of the friends, he had a friend who's he's got trauma from the Iraqi war. Anyway, he asked if I'd work on him. I said, no problem, I'll bring him along, work on him for nothing. The guy rang the Veterans Association and said, I want to know if it's all right if I go and have a session with this guy coming out from Australia. They said, oh, look, there's lots of charlatans out there. You know, I wouldn't go into a session with anybody. So the guy rang me and said, I'm not allowed to have a session. Talk about programming. He can't think for himself. He's been totally programmed that he cannot think for himself and come out of a session that was free, costing him nothing, mind you, free. And we could have very well cleared him.
It's a real shame, isn't it?
Well, there's your free will and choice. I have none.
Well, that's right.
You know? You know, it just amazes me how some people are totally giving their power away outside their reality to someone else. They'll be back in the next future. You know, they're stuck in time good and proper. They're in the game. They've got their souls good and proper to look at and understand what's going on.
That's exactly what the military program is all about. The whole system is based on, you know, giving away your power, you know, only making decisions based on authority figures and the people above you in the chain of command. You know, you don't think for yourself. You follow orders. You do what you're told.
Yeah, that's right.
The authority figure is a huge program. The authority figure, which could be anything. I mean, whomever is assigned authority and you believe that, then that becomes, you know, for
yeah, well, it's the same.
Layers of programs.
Yep. I have so many people at times say to me, if this existed, the doctors would know about it. I say, well, how would they know about it? You know?
The Doctor Zone program will allow them to see that it exists, so.
Yeah, you got to laugh some of the things out there with people because, and you'll see, they haven't, you know, people haven't learned to think. They're just running on programs. And they can't see that they're running on programs because they're programmed, see. You got to laugh sometimes some of the stuff, you know. Yeah.
The education system takes care of that. And I think sort of Shelley was talking about this the other day, you know, that the teacher's the authority, you know, the doctor's the authority. You know, there's always an authority that you need to talk to or, you know, consult with before you make any decisions in life. No one's making any choices of their own. The information that they're getting, you know, is always coming from elsewhere, the authority figure, and that comes from early childhood education.
Doctor, teacher, lawyer. I mean, every time you turn around, I got to talk to this. I got to talk to my neighbor. I got to talk to. It's incredible that people just can't make a decision. It's always somebody that has to be consulted, an authority figure. So,
well, just have a look at our world for a minute. You go to school, and of course in America you go to a fraternity. Well, a fraternity is a ritual, so therefore you're going to be in line for a start. Then you go from there into universities, and you're getting. So in other words, you're in school, you're getting programmed. You go to fraternity, now you're really getting programmed. Then you go into university, now you're really, really getting the soul is getting really programmed in the way life is. In other words, you're getting programmed in a little box to believe everything in that program, that you're a very special person, and this course you're doing is you know it all, you know all the keys, you know all the answers to everything. And they come out totally programmed to believe that. And when they go in, the doctors go in and, you know, they go up on the computer and they have a look for what's wrong with you and see it. Well, they know because the computer told them. They know because they were told that way. They know. Everything in the square, they know. I mean, I've trained professors, I've trained psychiatrists, I've trained psychologists. And I'm not, well, not all of them, but some of them are as thick as bricks, excuse the expression. You know, they cannot think for themselves. All they know is the program that they've been programmed into understand. They've never learned to think. Because they've had time to think. They went to school, they went to university, program all the way through. Someone else's reality. And remember the laws. He who enters the dimension of another is governed by the laws of that dimension. This is why it's the same as like, you know, I've been to prisons, I've worked with the most violent men in the prison system at times. 2 years old. You know what's happening. Mother and father, alcoholics and drug addicts. They were born under the dimension of the alcohol and the drugs and the violence. That's all they knew because they were born under that dimension. The moment I fold time and space and dimension, I clear the dimension, you cannot believe how humble with gratitude these men are when they get off the table. They didn't want to be that way. But they're just programmed into a program. They know nothing more. It's so easy to turn the system around. And this is where I believe the new future will be.
The dimension keeps looping itself over and over and over again. It's like you mentioned with the repeat offenders going into courtrooms, judges saying, you know, you're back again. Why? Yeah, and they can't tell. They're like, I don't know why this keeps happening to me. And that is why. They're stuck in that dimensional loop, repeating the same things over and over again until it's cleared.
Yeah, and it's just, it's as I said, it amazes me. I see it, and my students see it so clear because we're doing it all the time. We see the clarity of how it all works. And yet, I look at our mainstream system today, and to me, it reminds me of being the Dark Ages. You know?
Just a bit shinier now.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's tremendous, wonderful advancings in science today with medication and with certain medications and with certain operations and certain things they can do. You know, it's brilliant. But the thing is, the most invisible and the first thing of all is your thoughts. And that is invisible. First the invisible, then the visible. But they're all working on the end product, which is visible, and they're not looking at the invisible that can change the visible. If you change the invisible, it flows through the fractal of the hologram and changes the hologram, which is visible. Common sense.
That's a good analogy. It's a good explanation of it.
Well, we are going on almost 3 hours here, so I think we should start wrapping it up. I would like to readdress to anybody who's listening to come back to the website at www.holographic-kinetics.net and go to the page concerning lore and the laws of lore. That is, there's some very, very good information to put this together here for those who like to read and not listen. But Steve, I want to thank you so much for your time. I cannot convey my appreciation appropriately. This is truly, I mean, I hope to see work like this, your work, and work that others are heading in this direction of clearing ourselves, our templates, and getting back to our 0 point. I mean, not just for ourselves individually on an individual level, but for the impact that it will have for us collectively, whatever we may be. We won't know what we really are until we do this. So, Dan, you have anything to add to that?
Thanks.
Just corroborate the same thing, you know, just grateful that you've been able to take the time out of your busy schedule to sit down and chat with us today and talk, you know, through some of this stuff. I think it's really important for people to be aware of a lot of the things that you're really sort of trying to put out there and make people aware of. So, yeah, just really appreciate you taking the time to do that with us today. It's been great.
Yeah, no, thank you for having us on, and I really believe everything, as my old culture says, they've got the birth, death cycles of time, and what was in the past must unfold, and I believe we're becoming a new future. I believe this will be part of the new future.
Sounds good.
I'm going to cut us there. I'd like to thank everybody that's listened to this so far and hope that they have benefited and gotten some insights into their personal spaces and their inner landscapes as well. So I'm going to cut.